What up, fam? It's me, your host, Chuck Dog, and I'm here with a new podcast, Card Mafia. Fam, I'm going to be sitting down with my childhood friends of 21 plus years. We're going to talk about retro games, anime, music, big titties, all that fun stuff. If you got thin skin, maybe this isn't the podcast for you. This is our intro episode. So please give us some time to get some more episodes out. I really do appreciate it. We're probably going to be on YouTube, Spotify's, and all that good stuff. So drop us a like, a comment, a subscribes. If you want to support us over on Patreon for $5 a month. Throw us a few bones if you like the podcast. We appreciate it. All right. Me and Kid Nico, we going in hard on this one. We starting at the beginning. We've been friends for 21 years since before high school, basically. So we're going to go in and we're going to talk about all the stuff that we were into growing up, video games and all that fun stuff. This podcast will be all over the place, but for the most part, we'll be talking about retro games and stuff like that. So if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. Peace. What's up, guys, gals? I'm Chuck Dog, and this is
Kid Nico.
What's up, Kid Nico? You doing okay today?
I'm doing great, man. I'm
Good.
just watching the storm blow through right now, and that's why I was like hoping that I could make it out tonight because I was like, I don't know, my basement's flooding right now. So that's what we're going through. But it was also like one of those things where it's like, what can I do about it? I already tried to like set up a barricade, and that's not working out. So I figured the best thing that I could do tonight was come talk to you about video games.
Man, this has been a long time coming, dude, because how many times have I asked you over the years, like, we should start a podcast?
I know. And not only that, it's just like one of those things where we always come together, and whenever we get together, we just talk about things. And I don't know how many times at the end of those like 2-hour conversations, you're like, well, we could have just recorded that, bro. Like that could have been like a whole thing. Like people would love to hear us talk about that.
Yep.
And so, I think it's like anytime you're like passionate about something, I think there's people out there too that can be like, oh yeah, I fucking feel you on that. So,
well, I couldn't agree more, dude. And I think, for people that are maybe just tuning in, obviously this is our first episode, so it's going to be our intro or introduction episode. So kind of let people know some stuff about us. But yeah, like I said, man, this has been a thing I've been wanting to do for a long time. And every time we hang out, I don't know if it's the country boy in us or what, but we get to hanging out and we get to start nerding out together. And next thing you know, 2 hours go by, and like you said, I'm like, man, that could have been a podcast episode. So,
yeah, we're just sitting in a barn talking about technology, and it's just like the best of both worlds, really.
Technology, video games. Well, and maybe that's what we should tell people about the podcast, like what it's about, who we are, what gaming is to us and stuff like that. So maybe we could start at the beginning. As far as this podcast goes, I mean, it's probably going to cover a little bit of everything from, if you grew up in the 90s or early 2000s, we're going to cover, video games, cartoons, what else, man? Just nerdy culture, music,
the general culture of
stuff.
Like if you just turned 30 or if you're like mid 30s, whatever, then I think that you would kind of feel what we're laying down here.
Yeah, well, this morning I was thinking about how to put this in a way to where people could, and I think people could relate. But it's like, we have been best friends going on 21 years as of this year, and we've from the day
I know it's crazy.
It's wild. I was thinking about that this morning in the shower, and it's wild because the common factor that has always kept us together is been mainly video games, but obviously anime and stuff like that. And I think as of late, I've been getting a little burnt out on a lot of modern games, and I'm not saying that every modern game sucks big balls, but I'm just saying that a lot of these games, I don't know if it's just the push to have better graphics and the lack of actual gameplay, or whether it's micro or in-game transactions through skins and stuff like that. It's kind of pushed me away, and I don't know if you agree with that, but
Oh
That's kind of
yeah.
why we're
I
here. We want,
mean,
you know.
yeah, I think it's like one of those things because I have a son, and with him, we're playing a lot of like modern games. Is that's his cup of tea, and I guess it's like a weird thing. And I was actually listening to somebody talk about this earlier. Is like what your definition of kind of like nostalgic gaming is, and it's gonna be a weird thing because it's like a sliding scale in the way of to us in our age, like 20, 25 years ago, that's what we considered like nostalgic, old school. That's when games were good.
Right.
And so it's an interesting concept because it's just like, well, there's probably people that came before us that were like, well, that those games suck. Like
Yeah.
our time, Pong, that was a real man's game there.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, and I think about that with my son because I'm like, well, what's it going to be in like 20 years from now? It's like the game culture just going to continue to become like more capitalist, more like loot boxes, this, that, whatever. And then if that's the case, then like he'll look back and be like, well, Minecraft or whatever game that was like popular in 2010, that those were the times. That's when games were good.
Yeah.
And so I that's a sad concept because if that's the case, then it just seems like I don't know. I don't know if that means games are getting worse or if our games, no matter what age you come from, were better. Like whether it was
Yeah.
Xbox 360 and like Call of Duty, like when you played that for the first time when you were a 10-year-old and now you're 20, and you're like, oh, that's when games were good. So it's a wild thing to really consider that. And I think that, it'll come from a unique perspective with the two of us. And I think people in similar age, but I do think that there's a culture like just after us that were raised by like boomers and Gen Xers and they were raised on these boomer shooters and they're like, oh yeah, Quake. And, so
Yeah.
I think that there's an appreciation for it that extends into like Gen Z and such. It's an interesting thing.
Do you think maybe like because when you talk to your parents, or maybe not your parents or your uncles or something, maybe people that are a little bit older than you, like with my parents, when I talk to them, they talk about Mario or on Nintendo,
Mm-hmm.
Mario, like the old games, or maybe
Yeah.
Donkey Kong or arcade games, and that in their mind, like you were saying, maybe in their mind was the peak of gaming. So maybe it's not fair to
Yeah,
say
and even in like a pop culture sense, because I think like it used to be like when we were all growing up, it's like well everybody had a Nintendo, whether you had a Sega or you had a
yeah,
anything else. It's like you put you're grounded, Mister. No Nintendo for a week. It's like Mom, I've got a
yeah,
Sega Genesis,
yeah, dude. Well,
but
I
it was
think
like so culturally relevant back in the '90s that it's
yeah.
it was that big.
Well, yeah, and you had that. I guess I don't know if you'd call it like monocultures. You know how people gather around the TV shows every night, and you go to work the next day, and that's stuff that you could talk about. And I think with kids, especially with us, because we were right on the edge of probably one of the last generations to really be able to go outside, or not to be able to go outside, but some of the last generations to really be those. I don't know if you'd call them
Yeah.
normal, but just doing normal shit that
Yeah,
how do
I think
you
that there's like such a helicopter mom culture now where it's just like everybody's like, so it's just like hard for a kid to like go out on an adventure where he gets hurt most of the time. Like if he's,
well,
so,
you know,
and the culture's just changed anyway. Like kids would rather
yeah.
just hang out on the internet.
Well, I think that's the internet's part of the reason why too. I think, growing up, I don't know, you were the same way a lot, or your family was the same way. But we most of the time our doors were unlocked, shit like that. And then as
Hmm.
the internet comes along, I wonder, is it the internet that we're seeing all this stuff that's going on in the world versus is it's probably always been going on, right? It's just that
Hmm.
when you were younger back in the 90s, you left your doors open, you let your kids run around
Yeah.
unsupervised because you weren't as afraid of the world. And I think nowadays you get on, I mean, prime example, and I know a lot of these YouTubes and other social media apps are obviously geared toward your specific algorithms and stuff. So maybe I'm just a sick fuck, but you log on to YouTube for 5 minutes and there's people getting, real dead and everything else on there,
Yeah.
getting hurt and war. So, uh, you know, I just wonder if it's not changed over the years, where it's probably always been a little bit dangerous, and
Yeah. We're just
but
tuned in now.
we're
But then
tuned
that
in
is
now.
like a But that is, and I think about that, and I think, you know, that the virtual world is a big distraction for a lot of people, and I think no matter the age, and then it kind of gets into the whole, I don't know, like I even think about that as like modern gaming is a lot of like suck you in and try to like keep you type
Keep you
gaming.
there, yeah.
And so, and it's not retro gaming's not necessarily like that. You might come back and you might be a speedrunner, and if that's the case, then it's an exception. You're playing those types of games like 20 hours a day, basically.
Right,
And
right.
so, but a lot of modern gaming's like, I'm gonna suck you dry, and they will,
Yeah,
and it's to the point where I don't know, like it fucks with people's finances and it
yeah.
messes with people's lives, and it's just like a different, again, a different like unhealthy culture. If you've ever seen those like videos of like the Korean cafes and that kind of stuff, and just like how they're like, I don't know, it's a whole
Well,
thing. Like gaming as a whole has evolved into this
changed.
real. There's like a real darkness underneath it all in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking like, well, kids, that have grown up in the last, let's just say since Fortnite came out, for example, right? Because I wonder if kids will look back on this time like we did and say, you know what? I really loved when I spent a bunch of my own or my parents' money on this game. I think it would leave a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth if you fast forward 20 years versus how we grew up. Let's just say Metal Gear Solid on PS1, the first one. I picked that game up because this is a dumb reason why I even picked it up. It's like the only 2 disc game that I had ever really seen up until this point, and it was
Mm-hmm.
like a Target or something. I got it, we beat it, and yeah, you could replay and complete, everything and stuff. But when you beat it, it was an experience. It was a story. You followed it through, and
Mm-hmm.
you felt like you earned something. And even though it was over, I mean, it was so good that I remember my mom, and my mom, dude. I remember being a kid and trying to go. They make me go to sleep for school the next day. I look and I crawl down, kind of like the hallway. I was upstairs and I look down this, kind of you could peek down the flight of stairs and look into the living room, and her ass is down there playing Metal Gear Solid, and she
Ah,
beats the game, and
damn.
we didn't even have a memory card, so we were leaving our fucking PlayStation on. So I couldn't even play the game. So I basically watched my mom beat Metal Gear Solid. So uh, I just wonder if
Did you
kids,
guys figure out how to beat Psycho Mantis naturally?
dude, I'll be honest. Everything we did back then was we didn't really cheat and stuff like that because we didn't
Yeah.
we didn't have the internet and we were poor, dude. So we didn't have guides. So everything we did, my mom and I actually after that game, what was really cool, and it kind of sums up my point about kids looking back on their experiences. I they're not gonna look back on like a time where they were hanging out with their parents or their friends maybe in person and I mean looking back on that with my mom, I think we played, what was the other game, Spec Ops, like a bunch of shitty cheap games, but it was one of the best experiences looking back. And my mom, she got down on RuneScape, on World of Warcraft, and
Hmm.
and speaking of World of Warcraft, and I know we're jumping around, guys, gals,
Yeah, I mean,
but
it's there's a lot to talk about. There's
yeah,
a whole like 30
there's
years
so
worth of
much.
gaming to discuss.
That's the thing is where we've been friends for so much. There's so much to talk about. But I guess before I forget, something I guess one of the first times I remember playing a game. I mean, WoW sucks your life no matter what, especially back when it first came
Hmm.
out. But something that highlighted what you were saying earlier about how games are just keeping you in a specific, keeping you on it was daily quests, bro. Oh my
Yeah,
god, I
yeah,
can't fucking stand that shit anymore. And it was fun on what was it, the Isle of I forget the Blood Elf. It was during
yeah,
I guess the end of BC. Kel'Thuzad or one of those guys. I don't know. I wasn't raiding anymore at that point, so I can't really remember. But
yeah. And
but
I don't speak Blood Elf, and
yeah, but I do remember PvP in the shit ton on that island, and basically go to Shatrith and you go through the portal, or go through a portal, or they send you to that isle. And I forget the name of the island, but they had an instance on there. It was like a heroic thing, but anyways, you'd go there and do daily quests, and ultimately, it was the whole thing was designed to open up the Sunwell and all this shit. But I felt like those daily quests were just a pain in the ass, and I felt like that was the point. One of the first times I can remember being like, "This is the first time where I feel like they designed something to keep me on a game." Versus,
Yeah.
years of
Now it
playing
feels like a
RuneScape.
job.
Yeah, it feels like a job. Whereas
Yeah.
you played RuneScape for since basically 2000. Well, quit after
Yeah.
Evolution of Combat, but played for in
Yeah. World of
2000,
Warcraft's like,
2007.
here's your peasant
Yeah,
wages for the
yeah,
day.
yeah. So yeah, so it's changed over the years a lot, man.
Hmm.
So maybe we could kind of use this for a transitional point, and let's jump back into the beginning, and maybe start with you. And you know what was the first experience that you can remember gaming, seeing a game, playing a game? What's your first character you remember?
I think that my uncle had an NES, and so he had the original Mario Brothers, and so I would go over there and I kind of would play that with my cousins, and I took some interest in that. And then I don't know if I expressed that to my dad or what it was, but I know that he ended up buying an NES as well. And I think, let me see it. One of the first games that I had on there that I really was like into was Captain Skyhawk.
I
And
never even.
it's not a good game. It's a difficult game, but it was like one of the first games that I really
Wow.
ever like played on the NES. And so that was an experience, and
What?
it's it's still like one to go back to and just like kind of have fun with. That's a good example of like a nostalgic game that's not necessarily a good game, but that was still like one of my first games that I really was like, oh yeah, we own this as a family. Like this is my dad's NES, but it's
Yeah.
ours. It's our NES, and so I would play that, and then since I played his a lot, I ended up getting a Super Nintendo
That's
later
cool.
on for Christmas. So I had Super Mario Bros. Or Super Mario World, Dennis the Menace. That
There was a
was
Dennis
a
the Menace
terrible game
game.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
isn't that wild how many I mean, retro gaming's so cool in so many ways, and that's gonna be a big part of what we talk about. But there is a lot of really terrible like Lion King games and like
Oh yeah.
this really but the thing that was really cool though that I really liked about it, and not only about the consoles but about the games back then, was like they were just different, man. Like nowadays every console and even phones are the same way. Is like when they drop a new iPhone or they drop a new when's the last thing that we had that was added to a console that was like any kind of I wouldn't even call revolutionary, but it was cool, was the what was it, the PS3 with the Blu-ray. But as since then everything has just basically just been a slightly tweaked better version of itself,
Oh
right?
man.
And,
And it's such a mess. I was thinking about that actually yesterday. Is when I try to explain what the new Xbox models are, I have to like sit there. It's like I almost got to like draw a chart or something because it's like we went from
yeah,
Xbox
yeah.
to Xbox 360 to Xbox One, and now we're on Xbox. Oh, no! For one, there's Xbox One S, and then
Oh
there's
my god.
Xbox One X, and then there's Xbox Series X, and then it's just like,
Terrible.
geez, like which one is which? Like which one do I need to buy as a consumer? Because I
What?
can't imagine like mom going up to the store and being like, well, which one should I get for Billy?
Yeah.
And of course they're going to be like, well, get the $800 one.
Right, right. Get the most expensive one, right?
If he wants to play Fortnite in style, then this is the option. This is the
This is the
optimized
one,
option. Yeah.
man, dude, it's so frustrating because it's like I don't know, and this is probably not going to be something that younger audience really can relate too much because of digital downloading and stuff like that. But there's something magical about going to like a store and buying a physical copy, dude. I mean, and I'm sure that everyone listening that's born around us that was there for Wrath of the Lich King release at GameStop can relate, because I mean that was one of the I mean, we had already been friends for a long time, but maybe we can get one of our other buddies on that games with us a lot. But the three of us, we sat in that parking lot and with a bunch of other dudes sitting in their cars with their uh, friends waiting, and we all stood in line for that Wrath of the Lich King, and we got it. I think and back then that was not too much longer. It was a few years after the dollar menu had came out, right? And that's what
Yeah,
we
that
lived
was
on.
a hit.
So we sat in that parking lot with dollar menu. I think it was McDoubles, and we waited for GameStop midnight release. We went home, and I want to say we didn't have school the next day, or we were already done with school. I can't really. No, we did. We were still in school, I think, or maybe it was like our last year. I know you were out, but because I remember our buddy. I became friends with him in my senior year. So, and we were playing. That would have been BC. So yeah, it would have been like basically my senior year, and you would have been out by then. But that was the first time you had ever met our other friend that we are talking about,
Yeah, I
and
know. Yeah.
that Midnight release was just epic. It
Man,
was
that just kicked off a whole couple of years of just World of Warcraft, and it was pretty awesome.
grinding, dude. That was the first expansion where all of our friends had really got into WoW, man. Because I
Yeah.
mean, I I think it was before that was our other buddy and I. We played we played RuneScape together. And you and I we played for years before
Hmm.
that. But then I think I had talked to you about it. Like, hey man, you need to get on this WoW show with us and play. But you know,
Yeah, and I think it was always a computer issue for me because I was
yeah.
still on like that
That
dial up
Dale,
is.
didn't you have a Dale or something? I think.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. That
Mm,
shit couldn't run nothing. I remember trying to
no,
download Counter Strike and being like, "Well, guess I'm not going to be an online pro gamer after all."
that's what it was. Yeah, you were always a little bit behind on PCs. Even today, I think just a little bit.
I
But
am. I am.
just a little
I'm a
bit.
man of culture. I am
Hmm.
a humble being,
You know,
and
though, I
yeah,
I
I
bought I
remember even buying my first one was like it was not. It was kind of a potato to begin with when I finally bought my very first PC.
yeah. Well, I got a fucking brand new, or not brand new, it's a year old now, but I bought a really nice computer, dude, and like, and this is kind of a big reason, and part of the reason why I was not the reason why, but I was thinking like this would make a good podcast. But I bought this fucking $2,000 or $3,000 computer, badass graphic card, all this shit, and I play fucking RuneScape and like, Minecraft, and I haven't tried hardly any of the newer games, and it's kind of sad, dude, because it's like I love playing games, but I just can't stand the microtransactions, the skins. Like I just can't take it anymore, dude. And I
Yeah.
think it's what's kind of brought us to doing this because, and we'll get into this a little bit later. But the retro handhelds and they're fucking how a lot of
Hmm.
people probably don't know about them, and if they do, that's cool. But I didn't know that they were that deep. But I guess we should probably jump to. We were talking about some of our first games and stuff. And for me, it was my uncle as well. I went over to his house. You know how you growing up, you go spend time with your family and stuff. And my uncle would watch us at times, and stuff. Well, anyways, I went and hung out with him. He had a Sega Genesis, and only games I really remember is a Batman game, and then there was a Western game. It had a pink and a blue gun, like a light gun. What do they call those guns? Is it a light gun? I think it's a light gun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I had that, and we played the shit out of that, and Sonic the Hedgehog, I think,
I'm trying to
and
remember what that Western game is called. That's a pretty solid game. Is that the one? It is like a kind of a rail shooter, and so you
yeah,
have your character up here and they
arcadey
can
kind of.
roll. Yeah,
Well,
shit. I don't
and you
remember what it's
upgrade
called.
and,
It's a good
you
game.
upgrade your bullets and stuff as you go, and your guns
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
it's a
And
neat one.
me and my mom and my brothers played the hell out of that. And the Batman game was really fun. We had some other Mortal Kombat. I almost forgot Mortal Kombat as well. Um,
On Sega, it had blood.
yeah, I know. It was epic, dude. And then, like I said, it's Sonic. But that's all I can remember. But well, anyway, my uncle's kind of an asshole, right? So he gets in a divorce or something, and he wants his games. He wants his system
Yeah,
back. He
he's like,
ended
I
up.
want my Sega back.
Yeah, he let us borrow it for like a year, bro, and we played the shit out of it. We bought games for it and
Yeah, that was
everything.
pretty much yours at that point. You should have went to
Yeah. Hmm.
game court.
So crushed us, right, my brothers and I. Well, that it was
Yeah,
like a couple months later. I didn't even know. This is like, I mean, I was probably 7, 8, maybe. Christmas hits, bro, and of course we wake up for Christmas, and I didn't really even know about what a Super Nintendo even was, but we had been bummed that we lost our Sega Genesis, and me and my mom's like, hey, after we opened up a few presents, she's like, we didn't get you a lot this year, but we got you a joint present, and this was the theme, right? We didn't have a lot of money, so Christmas time was usually when my mom would throw in big and get a system like a console for me and my brothers, and well, we opened it. She brought this box, dude, and a brand new Super Nintendo in there, dude. It came with Yoshi's Island, I believe, at the time.
Ooh, baby, yeah, that
Yeah.
that that was a good one.
And once again, mom beats Yoshi's Island before we could even do it. But I mean, I played it, but she was just,
She was the original gamer.
she was the original gamer. I forget about this until we started talking about this actually, but yeah,
Yeah.
she played the
Well,
hell out of it.
it does make me curious if that goes back any more than what we know. Do you know if she ever played, if she was like into gaming, or
I
did she
don't
get
think
into
she
that
was.
after?
I don't think she was, and I think it was just like, you know, just seeing us have fun with it and kind of
Mhm.
interested in it because you got to admit, like, I remember looking at the box. I mean, the Super Nintendo itself maybe doesn't look like much to people today, but I mean, I remember back then, they were just, I don't know, it was just cool, and I think she got sucked in, like just like us. She saw us. I mean, how could you not look at some of those colors, especially on like some of the Super Mario worlds? And uh, uh, that's actually, now I remember, she had a friend that her husband. This is a common theme because, like I said, we didn't have much money. His name was Aaron. He had like snakes, iguanas, like all this shit, and occasionally, uh, my mom's friend and her would go out on like a girls' night, and I would stay over there. My brothers would stay with this guy, which is kind of weird looking back, but he was really cool. And he had a Super Nintendo over there, and I would play the shit out of the games on there. And I think, like, a couple months after that, mom and us surprised us with our own, and then we played that for a while. And my aunt, she had a kid. His name's Charles. He's my cousin, and he was the only child, and he had everything, dude. This kid had Legos. He had PCs back when Diablo first came out, Age of
Back when
Empires.
nobody had a PC.
Yeah, this motherfucker was building PCs back in the day before like everybody. And she gave me his old Nintendo, the original Nintendo. So we actually had, at a point, we had a Nintendo and a Super Nintendo. So it was really cool because now we could actually, my brothers, because you can imagine between me and my two brothers sharing controllers and games. That was the worst part. That was the only bad part, was having to share games. But
Hmm.
'cause especially when you get into games like Grand Theft Auto, and that's so addictive. And I mean GTA 3 and 4, and or Vice City, and it's sharing one console was terrible, dude. But so
Yeah, well, I could imagine with two other brothers. I didn't have that issue, as I had a sister, and we generally would play like co-op games, or it would be kind of like a watch along experience. If we played like a Final Fantasy or something, then it might just be me playing and then them kind of like watching on and just like getting into the actual story. And so
that's a
it was still a shared experience, but Big
little
Bro
different.
got to play the video games around there. I was running the
Yeah.
game.
Well, I didn't ever think about that actually with you and your sister, and how, and just, yeah, me and my brothers. And I just like, I mean, just doing this podcast kind of brought it up. But yeah, I never thought of that. Like, you probably didn't have to share, you little shit. You probably didn't have to share any
Mhm.
games, did you? Hardly, unless.
No, yeah, exactly. And then when I would go to my nephew's house, is like he had a little brother, and so we were
Damn,
like the big nephews, and therefore we always got dibs on the
damn,
Super Nintendo at his house. So
damn. I would.
he had Donkey Kong Country, and he had a couple of those types of games, and so he had a few games that I didn't have, and it was cool going over there and playing those.
Donkey Kong Country's one. I think it was
Sim
two.
City, he had Sim City on
What?
there.
I
Yeah,
saw I saw that on YouTube the other day. The one of the original Sim Cities, and it was on consoles, I guess. Is that, or was it on the
hmm.
PC?
Well, there was like it was just Sim City, and it was on Super Nintendo, and it was
Wow.
kind of cool because Nintendo actually licensed it, and so there's like if you do the disasters and you call on like Godzilla, then instead of Godzilla, it's like Bowser stomping through like your
Oh, that's
city and
cool.
shit. And
That's
so
so cool.
it's a good experience, but going back to it now, like it obviously the interface hasn't aged well because we've become so spoiled playing those
Right.
types of games. But I don't know. I think that if you can get into it and give it a chance, it's still, or it's all right. It's fun. It's zen.
For its time, it was badass. I mean,
It was
I remember.
really, yeah. And then that's the thing is like, a lot of games have aged well, but not all games have aged well.
Yeah. Well. Speaking of Sin City, when's the first time you ever played? Because I remember back in at least our schools, our elementary schools, they would have like a computer lab, and a lot of
Hmm.
people probably don't even know what we're talking about, but a computer lab a room basically with a bunch of fucking CRT, Dell or whatever, computers.
Yeah,
Uh,
everybody, and then it's like that's something that we'll never get back is like the sound
no,
of all those CRT monitors powering on
the
simultaneously.
smell. There was a smell and the warmth from the
Yeah, I know. You could
computers.
smell the
You feel
warm
it.
dust.
You could feel the
Yeah.
warmth in there because I remember that. I remember because we'd go in there mainly. The most thing we were hyped about was I remember this specifically because South Park was probably on its second season, maybe third season, and it was popping off. And I remember it just taking over the elementary school. And I remember
Hmm.
and I remember we were actually talking about this in the computer lab. My memory's weird, but it was when wrestling was huge, like NWO era, and it was when they released that documentary with all the wrestlers telling us how it was all fake,
Oh yeah,
crushing
that
our
I think
wrestling
that was like
dreams.
'97 or '98. I can't remember when that
Yeah,
came out,
but I
but
remember
yeah,
being in those labs playing the fuck out of Sim City, and there was that other game where you built stuff out of like gadgets and shit. I don't remember what it
yeah.
was.
I think that it's
You know what I'm
called
talking
Gizmos and Gadgets.
about? Okay.
And I can never remember what it's called, but I'm pretty sure it's Gizmos and Gadgets. And there is something more to that, but yeah, that's a really cool game too.
I
That's
I
one
don't
that I've tried to go back to a couple of times.
I never went back to it, but those are if it wasn't for those two games specifically, I don't know if I'd ever would have got into PC gaming as time went on, just because like it, I wouldn't have been known it was a thing really probably, and then because we didn't have a computer tool
Yeah,
probably
like
like
especially good
yeah
games.
yeah
Yeah,
I,
because that's how we were too. Is we when I got my first computer, I couldn't play anything really. Actually, play a actual game on it, and so what I kind of came down to is like sometimes you'd buy a cereal and it would come like a CD-ROM with like a little
mhm,
flash game, and because I couldn't play flash games either. If I got on
yeah.
dial-up, I'd be waiting 5 hours to load up a flash game. So
Isn't that wild though? And so frustrating when you're a kid. You finally get some shitty like hand-me-down laptop or something, right? You got one, probably back then less than a gigabyte of RAM, and you get a fucking game
it
from at the
sparks
time,
every time you plug in
yeah,
the power.
doesn't work. Where the fuck? I remember the first computer game I played. My grandmother, she worked at like an auto mechanic shop, and where they always had new computers because you need a system to keep track of like invoices and do Peachtree and all this stuff, invoicing bullshit, office clerical stuff. Well, she got one of those old computers and brought it home, and dude, I don't know if you remember this, but in Kroger there in town, dude, on the wall at the original Kroger, not the super one that they got now. As you walked in, there's like the on the left side there was like the pharmacy, or not the pharmacy, but the counter area and stuff. Well, there was a billboard right there, bro, and you could buy floppy disk games in Ziploc baggy things. I think they,
What?
I swear to God,
Really?
the most
Was
generic.
that?
This was back. This had to have been literally, man, like
That is amazing because I've always like
96,
heard
97.
about that culture existing, and my only recollection of that would be at the flea market, where they did
No,
have
man.
those types of things. That is really cool. Do you
Yep.
remember the video store that was in that Kroger at one point in time?
I don't. No, I don't. But like I said, all I remember, as far as those games were concerned, was just literally, going in there on the left. And the only reason we
That is
family
awesome.
we couldn't afford to be going to Kroger over there. We lived out in the country, so a lot of times we were just going over to a small town. Only reason I even ran into it because my grandmother brought that PC home, and she's like, I'll get you a game or something so you have something to do. Because I was playing, what's that? Mines. What's that game? Like on Windows, the
Oh,
Mines game.
Minesweeper or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. So I'd play that all the time, and I got bored with that. And she's like, "Well, we'll see if we can find you a different game." And she's like, "I seen them at Kroger." So yeah, I went up to Kroger, and they're in Ziploc bags. With I want to say they were either Ziplocked or they were like just had like the like says like generic something generic staple, like a
Yeah.
piece of cardboard on top, type of thing.
Yeah,
I don't-
that is crazy, man. Because I
yeah.
know that was like a whole thing, and like even sometimes from like companies that were distributing them,
Hmm.
that was the budget. Sometimes you had to get all your games made, and then you wrote it in Sharpie. It's like
Hmm.
Doom.
Yeah, it was real ghetto. Like it's dude, it didn't look like it's totally different what it is now. But
Yeah.
and
Well,
obviously
even
that.
thinking back at
Go ahead.
like at that certain point in time when the box art and stuff of PC games did become good, like going to Walmart and looking at those, like it was a display because they're huge boxes and it was like
Yeah.
always like in your face, colorful, and just like I didn't have a game, I didn't have a computer that could run them, but I'd look at them.
I can't tell you what that game, the first one that she bought me, and it was, I think she only bought me one. And but I know what I remember something somewhat of it was about, and if you showed it to me, I could point it out. But basically, you're like a dude, like your character, right? And it's the style of pixelish art, right? Obviously back then, but the way it was is the back was black, like just dark, and then like the blocks weren't colored like you would see like more of a modern, like say Stardew Valley, for example. It was almost like in neon outlines, right? So like
Mhm.
when you're in the ice level, all the ice was like sky blue color, and like it was almost just like the outlines of stuff. I've seen modern retakes on this, but basically it's just a black backdrop, and then like you go across these platforms and work your way up to the top and get to a certain point and to go on to the next level. But that's all I really remember about it. But you'd fight like witches, and there was like a wizard dude, and you'd power up a little bit, stuff like that. But a side
Huh.
scroller game. But I guess the second.
So was
Go
the
ahead.
overall like color palette kind of like that? What how you were describing it, or
Real basic, like so. Think of a platformer, pixel game, basically, but just like instead of filling in the blocks with like like if you look at like a Mario game, for example, that's obviously built out of a bunch of blocks, like miniature 16 by 16, or depending on what era, go up to like
yeah, that's what I
32
was
by
like
32.
wondering. Was like a NES comparison, or
Yeah, so uh, way more basic than NES,
that's what
but
I was wondering because it almost sounds like you're describing like a Commodore 64
That's
game, and I
that's
was
that
curious.
that's kind of the look, dude, and maybe it was some kind of port. I would imagine it's probably some kind of port,
Yeah,
right? But very basic, but also that's it had its own style because of that. Like I said,
I know that
it,
sounds
it
cool.
was very cool. And maybe we'll
Yeah.
look. Maybe I'll try to find it and insert it into the podcast. But those are some of my first memories. Just the Sega Genesis, the Super Nintendo, and then the I guess the second game, a couple years after that, maybe a year after, my grandma, we realized that to play games, that was the most frustrating thing is you had to have a better PC. So she ended up getting a better laptop, and by then I think Funko Land or GameStop had been opened,
Ooh,
and
baby.
I got a
Oh,
mech game, like
yeah.
a mech warrior game, where you're like it's like an RTS game, but that was my second game. And once again, man, I couldn't play it. Even that laptop was dog shit. So I basically went and bought this fucking $40 game. Couldn't even play. But
Wow.
so what's your
Did you
first?
never get to play
Go.
it then?
No, well, I literally was able to upload it to my grandma's laptop, dude, and it was so laggy, like I could like barely move my character. And obviously, an RTS,
Ah,
I think I'd played Age of Empires at this point and Diablo and stuff like that. My cousins. So when I saw that mech game, it was like an RTS kind of game. I thought that's kind of cool.
yeah.
I got it, and
I
then it
think it's
wouldn't
called
run.
like Mech Warriors,
It
the one that
is.
you're talking about.
Yep. It was the one. It was a popular one back then.
Yeah,
I couldn't
and
tell you
then
what year.
that one. Now I remember that one just because of its box art, because it had the big stout
Yeah.
back on the front. I'm like, damn, I want to play as that.
Yep. Yeah, the ones they had like the basic mechs on there was they had the ones with the big low hanging kind of arms and like forest army green kind of looking ones and blue like
Hmm.
but yeah, man, so maybe what was your next at what point did you get into like maybe a little bit more serious as you got older, or what was your next consoles after after
I
those,
don't know.
or what really
Was it,
hooked you
you're
in?
like talking about like all these like old computer things, and
Mm-hmm.
you're like unlocking the memories as I go, because these are things I haven't even thought of in like such a long time. But
Same. Yep.
like talking about that, as my nephews, they had a computer, and their computer actually did play games, and they had
Ooh.
a lot of those types of like floppies where it's just like all these random games.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember playing Warcraft 2 with them, and that was like
Wow.
just really cool and like way crazier than anything that I'd seen on like my games at home, because I had a Super Nintendo. And
Mm-hmm.
so seeing like these massive like battles, it's like, well, now we can, and we would do that. We'd play the make the custom maps and all that, and so you'd be like setting up all your characters, and you'd literally have like hundreds of, well, probably not hundreds, like I don't know how many,
50.
probably
No.
25
All right. Right.
units on screen all at once, and that was
Mm-hmm.
freaking insane. It's like, all right, well, I've never seen more than like four pixel creatures
Yeah.
on screen at once, so this is amazing. And so that
What?
was really cool. And I think, you know, after that, it would have been, I did start to kind of get into like some cool games. Like my mom always like tried to like keep them coming. And so like I would get a cool new system, and I might just get a couple, like 2 games for it, and that's what I had for a while, unless I go to the
Mm-hmm.
video store. But that's what was the main thing. We relied a lot on the video store, because they had plenty of games. I had a couple, but they had a lot of games. And so she did get me in Nintendo 64. And so I'd played a little bit of PlayStation at like friends' houses and that sort of thing. But like that was my next big system, was the N64. And I played the shit out of it for a long time. I got Mario Kart 64 from that. And I got Wave Race. That was like one of the games that I got for that Christmas. And so
Wave
I got a lot
race.
of cool games like going into it. And games kept me busy for a long time.
The 64 is one of those consoles, bro, that I actually didn't own until later in life. I think high school. Um,
Hmm.
but I gotta like how did I put this? So I lived in a small town in a rural area, and on my street, uh, there was probably 50 houses, right? And of course, there's other houses in this little town, but the way this town was, and you know the town, but it's just a long stretch, basically. There was a
Hmm.
stoplight, a gas station, and back then a pool hall and a hardware store, and a city council building.
Yeah,
And,
and that was like at a time when that town was like really nice. Like when I think about
oh,
it, I always
dude,
think of like it was as close to like a Mayberry, Andy Griffith type
yeah,
town as you could get.
yep,
And I know that, those are very far and few between now, but
yeah.
it felt like that type of town back in the day.
Yep. And you know, the way that where that town set it sits on a county line. So half of the kids, or most of the kids there go to the county that town sits in, and then the way it sits, there's a couple roads that run off that town that even though you drive through this town, if you go up this one road, you end up back in, the another county. So whoever lived on that road would go to this other county, and then everybody else in that town would go to this other one for further schooling or whatever, right? So, uh, my I lived on this road with probably I think it was at least three or four, five other houses, and this shifted up throughout the years that we lived on that road. Uh, Other families or kids that, and some of them had brothers and sisters. So any given time, there's probably 20 to 40 kids on this road. But the ones that I really got along with was we'll just I can probably say their real names because it doesn't really matter. Was Daniel and this guy named Brian, and Brian had a sister, but she didn't ever hang out with us. But Daniel's house was like the center focus of everything for many years because his mom and dad made really good money, and they always, dude, they would spend four, five, $600, $700 back in like the '90s on these kids for each one of them, and get them and I remember when the PlayStation, Xbox, and GameCube came out, they didn't get one console; they got them all. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right on Christmas.
Oh,
So yeah, but that being
man.
said,
I'm trying to remember if I ever had that friend. I don't know if I did
dude,
really.
epic. And I give them credit because like, dude, mom, like when I say I had a rough, I had nowhere rough like most people, but you know, you know how it is. You sometimes, especially after the
Yeah,
divorce, you just don't have money for stuff. But that place
yeah.
was
It
always
it was a
essential.
humble life, I think.
Yeah, that was, and that was before the internet too, right? It's really before cell phones. The cell phones came a couple years later. But that house, man, they had a basement, and down there we gamed for years, dude. Down there, I mean, we and I had it really special because those guys, they were like me. They love gaming. We all had Game Informers. We all had Electronic Gaming Monthly. We all collected shit, and we watched Aqua Teen Hunger Force together. I mean, everything about the 90s and 2000s, we were into it, and we were into it together. I mean, I would skip school with these guys. We'd play Grand Theft Auto 3 all day. Our parents wouldn't know we even doing this shit. You know, so it's like this house and it, of course we migrated to other friends in the area's house over the years, for the most part that was the focal point of where we hung out. And Daniel, like I said, he's one of my best friends. I still occasionally talk to him every once in a while, but
I wondered.
his family would hook him up, dude. He was one of the first kids that I ever saw with a flat screen CRTV, the nice one, like the Philips or whatever it was. Uh,
Hmm.
he had
Fancy
the
smancy.
yeah, he had a Dreamcast. I mean, and these guys, even back then, we would look on when they. I remember when the fucking internet first dropped for us, dude. We had dial up, AOL, and didn't do a whole lot of gaming. I think I tried RuneScape a little bit, and this was a few months before we actually met, dude. And this would have been I was 13, so this would have been like 2002 or three.
Hmm.
So because I think we started high school together, 04 to 07, I think it was, or yeah,
Yeah, hell, I couldn't even tell
oh
you.
03. It was 4 years, 03 to 07, or
Hmm.
03. Can I count? Yeah, yeah, 03. So this would have been 01, 02. Yeah, so I would have been like 12 years old. But dude, we'll get into the Daniel's house and the stuff that he did more. But that's
Yeah,
almost
I know.
a whole podcast. But
Yeah,
but
I
but
only know a part of that story, so I'd like to hear more about the games that you guys are getting into.
yeah, I mean, it's basically anyone that mattered because, like I said, we had Electronic Gaming Monthly, we had Game Informer, all these magazines. We had them all. I mean, back then, people don't realize, but back then, I mean, Game Informer, I think, is still around. Back then, it was
Yeah,
like your only way to get info on games.
yeah, it's very culturally relevant because you didn't have it in your face every single day. And so when a
Mm-hmm.
game was going to make an announcement and say, hey, we're here, we're coming out with this game, then Game Informer or whatever, like those magazines, a lot of them gained exclusive rights to show and
Mm-hmm.
reveal for a game or something. And
Yeah.
so unless you were like one of the like real actual nerds that were like tapped into like the underground like internet on the forums or like, oh, there's a new Mario Brothers coming out
Right.
soon, then that was your main source of any of like gaming information. And so I think that was really cool. I think it was really cool to have tips and tricks, is like having all the cheat codes and stuff in your tips and tricks magazines.
See, I felt like back then it was different too because yeah, you'd have like for example Pokemon, Game Boy Color with the red. Let's just say the Game Boy uh, Pokemon Red and Blue. You a lot of times, like for example, Daniel had a guide to teach you how to do all this shit. So a lot of times I was beating games the best that I could without any of that shit because we didn't have extra money to be buying. Those things were like $20 or $30. Those guides were pretty expensive. Um, but
Yeah.
but yeah, man, kind of lost train of thought there. But maybe to jump in and back to the N64 before we gloss over it too much. That thing was awesome, and like I said, we went on this tangent. But my point about the N64 was, it was one of those consoles that was just awesome, unique. I wish I owned one. The games were too expensive for me, but some of my memories of it, first memories were playing. I think it's Battle Tanks was the name of the game.
Hmm.
It's where you might know what I'm talking about, but you basically are
Yeah.
tanks and you're driving around and you could. I remember specifically this game because one of my favorite missiles I could launch. You can launch it
And
and
you
you
could
could camera it.
follow it.
Yes,
Yeah.
follow it. Yeah, that was
It
epic,
was
dude.
awesome, man.
That was so good. That and
Yeah. Well,
go ahead.
yeah. No, go ahead. I'm curious.
Well, I had already been playing Tony Hawk a little bit, Pro Skaters on like obviously PlayStation 1, but I think the newest one they had finally released it on N64. Played a lot of that. Um, and we played a lot of Super Smash, Mario Kart, um, and it was Mario World. I want to say Mario, or that might have been GameCube. I think it was just
Like
Smash and
there was like
Kart.
Mario 64, and then there was like the Mario parties and stuff. But that's what I was
Yeah.
gonna say too.
Okay.
Is I think you were saying that the N64 is like a unique console, and it
Mm-hmm.
was because it was the first game console to fucking bring the party.
Dude,
And
yeah.
so it was the first time that you could plug in like, and well, okay, it's not the first time that you could do that, because you could, that
Dreamcast,
was
I
a
think. Yeah.
capability on you, yeah, those games. And even back to the Sega Genesis and the SNES, is like you can get like a multi-tap and you could play multiplayer games. But that was also limited a lot of times to like football games, specifically like
Right.
Maddens and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
or a hockey game. But this time you guys could all race together, and this time you could do all kinds of cool stuff. Like everybody was like, you could fight battle together. Like all of a sudden you can play as Mario and fight Pikachu, or
Yeah.
it's just like it was a whole like it was. I think that they were trying a whole lot of new things that has worked out for them for a long time since then. Is just like sticking to like the family oriented, the party style type game console, and like the games that come out for it. It's like everybody,
Yeah.
the whole family can get in on this shit. It's gonna be fun.
Yep. I uh I think, man, 64, what you're talking about there is so cool because like if I would be in we'd be in situations at first where like we wouldn't have four controllers with like say N64 because they're kind of expensive. And
Yeah.
so my buddy Brian,
Nobody actually had four
nobody, yeah.
controllers. The
Yeah.
concept was cool, but yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
But my point was where we had all of our buddies lived in so close to each other, and we did go over each other's house. I mean, I literally would get off the bus. Not only did I go to school with these guys and was in classes with them, but we get off the bus and immediately go to Daniel's house, and we're down there. First thing we do, we're either making ramen noodles, pizza rolls, corn dogs,
Yeah,
stuff
just
like
got off
that.
the bus, about to hit them video games and
X
watch some
Play,
Tsunami.
watch X Play,
X
watch
Play,
Dragon Ball
yeah,
Z, like we could talk G4, and it was a whole thing in itself. That was
yeah.
so beautiful,
That's a
dude.
whole thing to talk about. That's 2 hours worth of
Man.
content.
And we'll do some deep dives too, where we'll have like say like literally just do a whole deep dive on, and we'll do some research on say like G4 stuff like that. But right
Yeah,
now we're kind of free balling it, but yeah, the 64, the whole concept of and like we said, obviously there's other ways, and I think the Dreamcast obviously is 4 player too. But even then,
hmm
there wasn't many games other than Blitz, NFL Blitz. I fucking love that
yeah,
game, by the way.
yeah.
That shit
Again,
was a
I know, and it's
yeah,
like sports titles were the thing. But don't get me wrong, if we're gonna
right.
play a sports title, NFL Blitz is the game to play.
Yeah, I love Blitz, dude. I used to
Oh,
make my
just being
neighbors
able to
so
drop
mad.
kick people and all.
Oh,
Yeah, I
dude.
know. It's like you get it in on them, you tackle them,
Yeah.
and then you just like, rub it in with your
Yep.
elbow.
Yeah. I mean, I thought there's something there's lost. I think with that kind of stuff because your buddies would show up, or my friends, we'd all work together. So like my buddy Brian, he ended up getting a 64 eventually. He got two controllers, so we would, you know, eventually everyone would have their own controller, or at least if I didn't have one of the consoles, I'd at least go buy a controller so I could play with them, right? So even though I didn't own a 64, I had a controller, but it was cool because those controllers were colorful. The something about that, packing your backpack up for the weekend after a long week of school, and knowing that you and your bros are about to go
Yeah,
home,
about to go
order
get it
pizza,
on. Did you
drink
have a
Mountain Dew.
particular color, or was it just like a gray controller?
I just had like the basic one, because usually
That's what
like
I wondered, because they
the
were colorful. They was like the crazy greens and reds and all that. It was neat.
they were more. I want to say those were more expensive, dude. Anytime you
Probably, yeah.
yeah. So like, usually if I got something, it was mostly the budget versions of stuff. But
Well,
that what
the Mad Cats.
yeah, the Mad Cats. Yeah, a lot of Mad Cat, shitty Mad Cats, bro.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Talk about like player three shit.
yeah. 64, dude. I want to. I'm trying to remember. Well, Pokemon Stadium and Pokemon Snap, dude. Like obviously those were
Hmm.
great. But
Still
yeah,
good. Yeah, those are a lot of fun. I enjoyed all the, well, particularly like WrestleMania 2000, WWE No Mercy. That was on like the, whatever they're called, the Aka system. And so it was like a really, really fun time to like be into like the wrestling games. Those were cool. And
yeah.
then I don't know if you ever played or maybe even seen stuff on Mystical Ninja. It's like
What system?
Goemon, Mystical Ninja, and so he kind of looks like a Goku wannabe.
Mm-mm. No.
Oh man, and that's on Nintendo 64. That's
Yeah.
like one of those, and it's like, I wouldn't say it's like a hidden gem anymore because like the internet's made it culturally relevant, but I just happened to come across it at the video store when I was a kid. And what got my attention was that it was like an anime style like art on the game, and I was like,
Oh
oh, well,
wow.
I haven't really played those types of games. I've seen that on like Dragon Ball Z and stuff, but I haven't played a game like that. And it's poorly translated probably, but it's also like maintains this real zany like kind of Japanese like culture that I hadn't played like a game quite like it. This is really, really silly, and there's a lot of other games that came before it, and there's a few that came after it, and we can get into that all some other time too.
Yeah.
Goemon and Mystical Ninja, just like that series in general, is good, and there are two on Nintendo 64 worth checking out.
That's something and maybe we could do some playthroughs together. We'll pick a game out and revisit them at least on some of the new handhelds, the retro handhelds and stuff. We could, obviously there's going to be some limitations with certain games and stuff like that. But maybe we could do like a review or like a playthrough, and when we do the podcast, we could kind of catch up and talk about the game, or maybe even eventually let as we build an audience, let the audience choose what games we play. Something
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Super
And I
cool.
mean, if there's like something that talking about hidden gems and stuff, is I'm sure that
Yeah,
other people have like games that were very specific and very important to them in coming of age and stuff. And it's like that's my main thing is, and when you invited me to do this, like I was very intrigued by the concept because like I know that there's not necessarily even an audience, but just like a following of people that all can kind of come together, and this experience of like sharing our experiences just feels warm and it feels good, and
yeah,
it's good to build a community around something like this,
I agree.
because and that's I throughout this, like, even is like I've heard a lot of like, oh, we had it tough but we maintained, and coming
Hmm.
up as a kid, it's like we didn't have everything but we had this,
Yeah,
and so it's like always been there for us. And I think that it still is in a lot of ways, and it's a good escape from this reality. And I wouldn't even call it a distraction,
mm-mm.
because there was and still can be a period in time where it's a shared experience, and we're
Yeah.
all having fun together, and it's not just and we can get into that too, because you get into, well, I mean, we play Fortnite online together, and it's like, yeah, but like being in the living room and everybody getting up from the couch and like
Screaming.
throwing controllers, and yeah,
Smash
like it's
Bros. Prime
yeah,
example. Smash
it's
Bros.
serious. Like, yeah, it's when you get like four sweaty men in like a room playing Smash Brothers, like we all fucking turn into apes about it because
Hey,
it's
girls
like
too. Your
everybody
sister,
wants to be. Oh yeah,
your
true. That's
sister
true.
crushed on there, man. Your sister beat some
Yeah,
ass.
yeah,
For real.
that is true. Is because there's that was a fun one to play with because everybody came at it in a different way, and I think
Yeah.
everybody could kind of pick up and play it. And that was as a whole thing in itself. So I love me
It
some
was
Super Smash.
Super Smash was so big and so powerful, and we're talking about the GameCube Melee version, but was
Yeah.
so big and for us and our our own friends group that how many times over the years has somebody bought a GameCube literally, and you're usually the guy. And I tell all my other friends, about this that maybe you don't know or whatever. Over the years, I said I got this buddy, and man, he's always got a GameCube, and that's like it's the perfect icebreaker if you get around a bunch of people you don't really know, especially a bunch of
Yeah, I know.
fucking hairy dudes like us, and you drop the fact you
Yeah.
played Smash Brothers on GameCube. Everyone could kind of connect, and that was we even years
See, I
later.
always keep
Oh,
the
there you
GameCube
go,
handy, you know.
got it on them.
And that one has the friggin' Game
Oh,
Boy Advance
nice.
port too, so you can play
Oh
the
yeah.
Game Boy games on it.
What's the
Game Boy
Advanced
Player.
Tanks? What's the strategy game? We were just talking about this the other day. The tanks game, the Advanced Wars. Advanced Wars.
Oh yeah, on
We
Game Boy Advance. Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
good game.
my buddy Daniel, of course, like True Fat, and his,
Yeah.
he got that Game Boy. His mom got him that Game Boy thing. I remember we were playing. I remember it because he was the first one in our town, or out of all the kids, to have a flat screen, one of those newer CRT silver ones, like the one that you ended up
Yeah.
trading me. But it was a nice one, like a Philips or something, or like a really nice one,
Yeah.
And
That's awesome.
yeah, I remember it because
Well, that is cool.
Aqua Teen Hunger Force and stuff had just coming out, so we were not just coming out, but we were buying the DVDs, Napoleon Dynamite, a couple other movies and shows from back then. The first Lord of the Rings. So he had gotten that CRT TV in there for like a couple years. Yeah, it was epic because we were gaming on a GameCube and all these PlayStation 2s, and all this shit on a really nice CRT. So like my
Hmm.
experience with it was, I didn't know it at the time, was like peak, dude. Like really it was like,
Yeah, I
looking
know.
back it seems silly, but
Especially
we
for those
were.
types of games because you were playing it in, in my
Yeah.
opinion, like the most optimal way.
Yeah. Well, so we didn't really talk much about PlayStation. We didn't talk much about Xbox, and we didn't talk much about handhelds. So we gotta backtrack just a little bit, man.
Ah,
So
well,
so
well, in a way, because I'd say backtrack, but really, in reality, we would jump from the very beginning to World of Warcraft, back to Call of
yeah,
Duty, back
true.
to. So we're just kind of we're doing the Pulp Fiction thing, man. It's like
Yeah.
we're letting loose here.
Intro.
There's just again 30 years worth of shit to talk about.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And I think it's important too that this may not be how every episode's structured. We're going to do different stuff. We're going to do deep dives on a particular subject. I think it's just important to kind
yeah,
of maybe do a little intro episode. It might run 2 episodes at the rate we're going. Getting some, we're actually getting some good time here. So, but let's talk about because I mean, we did gloss over World of Warcraft and stuff like that, jump around, but each one of those things probably could deserve their own episodes with all the stuff that
exactly. I know, and that's what
it's
I think
so
about too.
much
Is
stuff.
like, and there's other people that I'd love to get in on those types of things too.
Yep,
Like
yeah,
it's like,
we
well, I
will.
want to talk to my buddies about it because I know other people love that,
Yeah,
and they've had those times too, and they've shared those experiences, and I want to hear about their experiences too. Like it's awesome.
yeah. Well, I think I've been making, full transparency, I've been making a couple of podcasts already for people who are watching. So it's like, I've been doing this for a few years, just playing around with it. I've already been on YouTube a little bit, messing around, got a little bit of experience. That being said, I've been asking all my buddies of 20 some years, like, man, let's make a podcast. Like, and I think through this, man, our other buddies will be like, that's a good ass idea. That's cool. And then also, as we get older, it's a cool thing we could look back and watch. When I'm 90 years old, laying there crapping myself in the bed, I'll go back and watch this and relive the memories. Man, I got Alzheimer's and everything, but yeah, there's something beautiful about that. Everything that we all went through growing up, and I know it's going to take a lot to go through it all, and it's probably hard for people to digest because we are all over the place. But maybe we dial it back in and kind of talk about PlayStation, because I've kind of got the vibe growing up that I don't know if it was like for you, but you were either a PlayStation bro or 64 bro. So
Yeah, yeah,
for
and it's no different. We get into that, and you could say, well, you're a Super Nintendo bro, or you're a Sega
mhm.
bro.
Yeah, that too, and I think there are obviously going to be people that could afford multiple systems. There's people that are going to be obviously that's not set in stone, but it just like growing up, I just remember like that was the vibe at least around us. It was like
Yeah,
almost
it
like
was a whole cultural divide where it's just like,
mm-mm,
well, Nintendo 64, that shit's for kids.
yeah,
That's for
yeah,
babies, bro.
yeah,
It's like,
and then
if you want to play some real games, come play Resident Evil on PlayStation 1.
well, I guess we'd have to talk about the Attitude Era and the Extreme Era and all that. I guess if you call it kind of like that,
Hmm.
because during the '90s, that's I feel like and Sega employed that on or used that against Nintendo during their campaigns to like put Sega and Sonic. They used Sonic and the way he was cool, he was fast. He was kind of had that
Oh, yeah.
attitude.
He was
Versus
radical, bro.
yeah, he was tubular, whatever. But
Hmm.
versus Mario, is a little, maybe a little out of shape. Maybe
Yeah. He's
for
just an Italian plumber that's
yeah,
got to save a princess.
in the '90s,
He's like a
he was
man that works a 9 to 5, and
yeah.
Sonic's like the dude that's like out partying with chicks at night. He's like, I don't even have to work.
Well, I think as the '90s went along, man, it just didn't match the tone there for just a little bit at least. Because you had
Hmm.
things like Jackass, you had South Park, you had wrestling, you had all these things that were really extreme. You had Tony Hawk Pro Skaters and stuff like that. So it's like the extreme notch got leveled, ramped up a bit. So like to
Yeah.
me, until the GameCube came, there was a brief stint where I was like, I don't really like this Mario stuff or whatever as much anymore.
Well, and I understand that because I think we were all feeding into it. We were all coming of age. We were all becoming teenagers, and we're like, "Ugh, the world
Yeah,
sucks." And so now all of
CKY.
a sudden, like we want to play like edgy games. We want to play. If you heard of a controversial game like
You
Grand
want to
Theft
play
Auto
it?
3, then it's like, oh well, I want to play that, and it's like those were the games that our parents were, or some people's
Mm-hmm.
parents were saying, no, we can't buy those games. And so
Yeah.
then that really became it's a whole thing in itself, is that was game changing. I mean, people, I guess there were certain people that probably dealt with that with like the original Mortal Kombat
Oh
back
yeah.
on Sega back in the day, but I
Yeah.
never had any troubles like that. And I don't think that I ever did until I got Grand Theft Auto 3. And
Wow.
yeah, the store clerk like warned my mom, and so she was like, because he's like, well, it has prostitutes and stuff in it,
Yeah.
and she's like, oh, we can't get that, and I was like, oh, come on, and I ended up talking her into it, but it was a hard sell.
you know, my mom and them weren't really like that with us on games and stuff. I think my parents kind of understood that, like kids are gonna be kids, and like I would
Hmm.
just go play it at my buddy's house. But speaking of Grand Theft Auto
Yeah.
3, that game almost got me and my parents into a lot of trouble because the guys I was talking about, Daniel and Brian's mom, she was like a nurse, so she was gone all day, right? So we figured out if we just go after she leaves at 7:30 before the bus gets there, if we just go over his house and just don't come out, there'd be like 4 or 5 of us sitting in his house all day while we're supposed to be at school playing Grand Theft Auto 3. And we did it. We skipped school so much. Every Friday we skipped for I think it was 8 weeks in a row that our teacher, Mrs.
Mm-mm-mm.
Cluse, she
Shame.
she sat me down and she said, "Why are you and Brian missing the same Fridays?" Or well, that where she sat me down. She said, "Why are you missing every Friday every week?" I said, "Well, I'm sick," and she said,
Every Friday.
"Every Friday?" And then she's like, "It's odd that you and somebody that lives close to you in your neighborhood are missing the same Fridays every day as me."
Dang.
And I
Miss
was like,
Cluse was on to you, bro. She was
"Yeah."
sleuthing.
So they sent us a letter like telling us, telling my folks, but I was smart, dude. I make sure to catch the answer machine, and I caught that letter, dude. So they never knew about it. But
No.
and
Dang. That's
then
slick.
we couldn't skip there no more because his mom started working
No,
different
but not.
schedules. But when Vice City came out, we would hide in this abandoned house till the bus came, and we had another buddy named Steven. Steven's dad was a truck driver. He's gone all the time. Dude, that's when we got into PCN again, and I got actually ended up getting in some trouble, broke into the vocational school, and really ended up how I became friends with you. But at the rate we're going to talk about that in the next episode. But dialing it back to back to like the PlayStations and stuff like that. You know, it wasn't so much for me like PlayStation versus 64 versus I just couldn't afford a 64 because they were more expensive. I do remember when PlayStation dropped in price, and then the games were
Mm-hmm.
more affordable. So Christmas comes around, mom buys us the PlayStation, and then I just had to enjoy 64 through my buddies, like we were talking about. So, did you get a
Now, was that
PlayStation?
the
Okay.
like slim
No, the original
PlayStation, or
one.
was it like the big chunky? Okay, because
So,
that's what it was for me. Is like I got the more compact one when that came out because it
okay,
was, I guess, I don't know if it was cheaper at that point, but that
it
was the one
was.
that I got. I never had the original
Yeah.
PlayStation. I don't think I ever owned the original PlayStation.
So my buddy, I forgot to mention him. I lived for a while, or we ended up moving. A few years into that, I was probably 10 years old when we moved down just a couple of roads. So I rode my bike up and hung out with Daniel and them all the time. But there was probably like a year or two where we all kind of like just quit hanging out. We were all going through puberty and shit like that. So we just were all doing our shit. Well, so a new kid moved when I moved. This new family moved in next door to the house that we moved in at the same time, and his name is Zach. And we ended up becoming really good friends. And his family's the same way. Both of his parents worked. They had a little bit of money because of it. His dad had a pretty good job at this factory, and he didn't have like all the systems, but he had a PlayStation 2 and he had a dick ton of games. I'm talking like all the
Uh,
Star Wars games. Some of my first memories would be like Spyro the Dragon on the PlayStation. That was the first
mm-hmm.
experience I ever had where it made me nauseous on a game too, which is kind of weird. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, so Spyro, a lot of like he was really into Star Wars, so a lot of Star Wars games. Um, like I said, we ended up
yeah, which there was a plenty.
yeah. So we ended up getting a PlayStation though, and I guess some of the first games I can remember that we got was, like I said, earlier was like Metal Gear Solid. I think Spec
I know
Ops was
that's a
another
good
one, like
one.
a military game.
Mm-hmm.
Some other games that we had. It's hard for ATV game. Well, that would have been PS2.
I
I'm trying. We
know.
didn't really get a lot of PlayStation games. I can't
Uh,
remember because
that
I
that's
can't
what's
remember.
crazy to me too is like for some reason like I can remember so fondly of some of the games that I got
Tony
for other
Hawk.
systems the first time. The PlayStation, I'm having a hard time remembering just what games I got when I first got my PlayStation. Like I don't
Well,
know, maybe I don't know why that hasn't stuck with me as much.
if if you would have got a PlayStation Slim, so like you probably would have missed the whole like point of like having a PlayStation because like there for a while I remember it was a thing. Tony Hawk Pro Skater wasn't out like on all of them. I remember when it came out on the 64, but
Yeah.
originally it was on the PlayStation. And I don't know if it was only PlayStation
Yeah,
right away,
well, yeah,
but
and PlayStation version was definitely to me it was superior in the way of like the way
yeah,
the controls and stuff were on PlayStation.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I was forced to play it on 64 because I didn't have the PlayStation version.
Yeah, so the Tony Hawk was like a big selling point, and there was
Hmm.
also some snowboarding games. I
Well,
remember
Crash Bandicoot was like big
yeah,
at in the beginning, is it was like Crash
hmm
Bandicoot and Spyro, and so
yeah,
you had a lot of cool cool mascots, and then Final Fantasy. I mean, you had Final
yeah. That's true.
Fantasy
Final
7,
Seven.
8,
Yeah,
9,
yeah,
all on
yeah,
PlayStation. And so
yeah,
you get into a whole different like thing because then you get into like Breath of Fire. There's all these like cool. That was probably like the best era as far as like tactical RPG type games go,
yeah,
that aren't overly advanced. That's something that it's hard for me to get
yeah,
into some of the more modern ones because there are so many mechanics. Now it's just like, well, I got to manage this and these runes and this relic system and this prestige system, and it's like just if I kill something and it drops loot, I want to be able to equip that loot
yeah.
and then keep on rolling, baby.
Well, when we played, my buddy Zach, he played Low Crash Bandicoot, but he had Final Fantasy 7, but that game was just too over my head. I'll be honest when I first played it, but
Mm-hmm.
revisited 10
It was a
too.
lot to go for like a kid, I think, to comprehend because like we
Yeah,
didn't play like RPGs and stuff. There was a time where it was just like well, you start on this side of the screen and your goal is to get to this side of the screen. So now it's like, well, you gotta go on this quest and you gotta talk to this villager. And if you don't talk to this villager, you're not gonna know where the hell to go. And pretty soon you
Yeah.
find yourself all over, you
Yep.
know, 2 hours away from where you're supposed to be going. And it's just like, as a kid, it's like harder to comprehend that you actually have to like make an effort to pay attention to what's going on in the game rather than,
Yeah.
oh, we'll kill this and you win.
Yeah. Well, I think too with those games, the artwork on the covers and the fact that some of them were like double disc and stuff like that.
Hmm.
That's something I talked to her about with like videos and how like Blockbuster and how like a video store was an experience because nowadays if you go on a streaming platform or whatever, like there are certain ones that are pushed, whether it's agenda based or whatever, are pushed to the front. Whereas like in a movie store, there was like a new, obviously, like at our movie store, like the whole outer walls was all new stuff, and then they would have sections. So like, you could instead of just like going on Netflix and all this crap being thrown at you, and they, the algorithms kind of like slowly pick stuff for you. But I don't want that. I want to be able to randomness. I want to be able to walk into a place and
Hmm.
physically pick up the box and look at it and I would always get pizza. We like my family. This wasn't a thing for years, dude. Because in a small town, all you had was we didn't even have movies there, so we had to rent movies. So when a new movie came out, that was awesome. Dad and I and my brothers, we ride over in the next little town. They had a little video shop. They had like a Taco Bell and a KFC. I know it's gross, but we back then we ate it up and we'd get candy and it was an experience and I even remember going to my grandparents' house out of state, and that was the thing we did. We go rent videos, and I didn't rent a lot of video games, but I think you did, didn't you? You guys rented a shit ton of video
Hmm.
games, didn't you? Like,
Yeah,
see,
that because that was,
that was the
and
way to do
we
it,
were
dude.
fortunate enough to where we had close access to the video store down the road. We had a Roadrunner video down the road, and yeah, they were pretty well stocked, I think, for a video store of the time in like such a small town. And so there was a lot of selection, and they
Yeah.
knew me very much as a like a little probably burden of a fucking regular because there were certain games, especially during the 64 era when the Pokemon games and stuff came about.
Oh
Then
yeah.
it was just like, well, I would go to the video store just to ask, oh, well, do you guys have this game?
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh, this kid again. They probably saw me walking in. They're like, oh, God. But they did actually hold on to, I think it was Pokemon Stadium 1 at one point because I kept asking them and I saw the box was out. And eventually they were just like, we have it right here for you. And so
Oh man.
that was a nice thing for them to do because that was my main supply of Pokemon games is going to the video store.
Wasn't that like throttling, I guess you could call it, or that like dripping of stuff so much? It made stuff feel so much cooler and rewarding. Nowadays,
Yeah,
everything's not even
yeah,
a 5 second. Nowadays, everything's 5 seconds shorts. Everything. I play a game for 5 minutes. I'm
it
moving to the next
is.
game. Like,
I think that being spoiled for choice is bad, and even going back to like retro gaming now, like the truth and the reality is that like maybe 20% of like old school games that we were playing at the time are actually good, and
right,
then a lesser percentage of that are like masterpieces. But it's, we got to learn that the hard way. Is there was no
right,
like, oh, let's get on the internet and see what everybody else thinks. And
yeah,
so it's a very culture driven like thing now where it's like people decide, is this game good or this game bad, whereas like we're going out there and getting in the trenches and figuring out that,
yeah,
we just rented a shitty game for the next 2 days and we're either going to learn how to deal with it or just not
right.
play it at all.
Well, I think too. Nowadays, like there's that culture of like maxing everything out, dude. You see it on WoW,
Hmm.
and something else that really uh max DPS all is like peak performance type shit, being efficient. Like that shit's run games too in a lot of ways for me because it's like, for example, WoW. It used when you first played through Classic. I know we're probably gonna jump back to WoW a lot because it's a big part of our friendship,
Yeah. Oh,
but
for sure. Yeah.
that game there was so fun in the beginning because there wasn't gods and shit, and you didn't know where you were. So like, like
Hmm.
revisiting now. I've played revisit classic and stuff and played through and season of discovery, and it was really fun. But you never capture that same new feeling unless
Yeah.
it's like it's so.
Oh yeah. I mean it is. That's a big thing is like even being able to go to like the wiki for looking up the information and stuff. Like back then and it almost goes back to like that kind of like playground like culture of like people
Mm-hmm.
just like talking amongst themselves about well if you want to beat this boss or you're looking for this weapon, you're going to have to kill this thing. And so, unless
Yeah.
you're like really in touch and in tune, then everybody is like learning together for the first time. And I think that
Yeah, man.
it was such a vast world, and you go into it, and there was just so much. It felt so big, and that was really like a neat time when you couldn't necessarily, or if you did consult like any kind of strategies, then it was like always these like really like horrible websites where it was just like straight up like WordPad. You print it out on like paper
Yeah.
in the library at the school,
Yeah.
and yeah. So I mean, we were roughing it, but that was kind of something that made it cool.
It was, man. There was just something about that throttling and that unknown and like that yeah, you had to be patient. I mean, you were impatient because you waited a long time for stuff. And yeah, you're right with a lot of the games were trashy if you go back and play them. But at least they were like unique. Like now I look at games that come out
Yeah.
and there's stuff that there's modern games that have come out recently, especially some of these indie projects that have been fucking phenomenal. Like but
Hmm. Yeah, I
but
know. We
it's
could
just
talk
not the
about that
same.
forever. There's lots of
Yeah,
really good games now.
yeah,
But yeah, it is more comfortable for me generally to go back to like older games and just it just suits my needs currently just better as a gamer.
me too.
Because there was this weird transition that happened during that time.
Hmm.
But yeah, playing even now, playing on one of those is just it feels. And we've talked about this too with the CRT experience. Just watching movies or whatever, there's like a depth that it creates with inside that like box that just feels right. And so like
Hmm.
just playing even Super Mario World or something on it, just like you can see the whole world inside that little box.
Well, for me, it's the weight of the TV. It's the way it looks. It's the hum that it makes when the tubes. I guess it drives her my old lady. It drives her nuts actually. So had to
Yeah,
move it out of the room. But something that was really interesting to me, man, and I don't think a lot of people realize this. But I would challenge anybody to, if you have an old CRTV lying around, one of the flat screen ones, especially what is the actual, I think Philips is, I forget the actual brand.
yeah. Philips is solid. Sony
Sony, yeah,
makes the Trinitron, and
Trinitron.
that's people will consider that kind of like not maybe not the holy grail because then you can get into like PVM monitors and like
Yeah, that old one
stuff
from
that
the,
studios and that kind
yeah, I
of thing
seen that.
were using. But I mean, then you're getting into like some crazy serious
Yeah.
money. And
I
so Trinitron to the general public makes, and you can still get like a quality Trinitron TV like that produces fucking great results for those types of
Yeah.
games.
It's wild to see how much they've spiked in price over the years because you can get some box ones I see every once in a while. They're anywhere from
Yeah,
$400 to $1,000 for a 20
yeah.
inch.
People have called on all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden, and that's you get into the whole thing there too. But
Yeah.
there was like a certain point with the out like the virus and shit where all of a sudden uh, people were stuck indoors and they wanted to do something, and they were just thinking they're like, oh man, and I remember that game I used to play,
Yeah.
and they started going out and buying those games, whether it was Pokemon or whether it was like their old Super Nintendo they played 20 years ago or whatever,
Yeah.
and
I do
they
this.
needed something to play those things on, and so like all of a sudden, like all that shit, there it was a supply and demand of like shit that's 20 years old. All of a sudden, it's like worth double in the 6 months time or something. Like it was a
Yeah.
crazy time, but it was
Yeah.
also a cool time to catch those types of things because now the market has kind of it's
Going down.
deflated a
Yeah.
little bit. Like, but what you were saying, yeah. If you want to buy one of those in box or something, like people know what they got now.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's even grandma knows what she's got now.
Yeah. I occasionally I don't know the names of all the particular models and stuff, but I always think, I got the one from you, and I think it's good to have a second CRTV and even a different size one so I can use them for different reasons and put them on my desk or whatever. But I do occasionally hop on eBay, dude, and I look at that Sony monitoring thing that they use for television. I don't forget
Yeah.
the number, the model, but dude, I occasionally look at them, and there's some on there they're like $800, and I think to myself like, whenever I hit it, if I ever hit the lottery or something, I'm gonna buy one of those
Yeah.
fucking things, dude. They look so
I
nice.
mean, and don't get me wrong, because the image does, even like in pictures and stuff, it does look beautiful. And I think that if you wanted to play like a high def, almost like, but still maintain like the original experience, then it's a really cool option. And it's neat.
Yeah,
Because and that's something else I thought of before. Is I used to think that, well, that's such a small screen, because a lot of times people pay crazy money for these and they're like 14 inches, and I'm just like, that's a tough sell for me. But honestly, I don't know. Like, I guess my perspective on that is changing because we were talking about the retro handhelds, and
that's
it's
yeah,
I can play on a smaller screen, and I think with those, because there was a time I bought a CRT some years ago, and I think that it might have been like a 12-inch or something. It was pretty small, and I couldn't really get into it, and I didn't keep it around. But I think it's because I was trying to go for like a different type of like lounge experience with like a little TV,
yeah,
where it was like something I almost needed to like pick up and just be like,
yeah.
that's much better. Now it's where it needs to be.
That's kind of what I notice with my Steam Deck sometimes. It's like there's sometimes where I want to play with it more. I don't know if it's my vision's getting bad, but yeah, like sometimes I don't want to play with it down in my lap. I kind of want to put it up like almost to my face,
Yeah,
to where I can
and
actually
but
like
you got
see
to
it.
work out for
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it's a little
You need like
clunky.
some kind of assistant thing where
Yeah,
you can just like put it on something to like hold it right here.
yeah. Same thing with I got an iPad here, and I got one of the bigger ones, and it's the same deal with that. It's like at night, I don't want to sound like a little sissy here, but when you're laying on your back and your chin's like on a pillow, it's just not very good. So it's kind of why another reason why I wanted to get into talking about some of these new retro handhelds because they're not even just gaming devices anymore. There are all kinds of things, MP3 players, media players, and shit. But before we leave and jump onto that topic, because I think we're going to have to bust down a whole episode for it. Let's finish up
Yeah,
with our childhood
an episode
stuff.
or two.
Yeah, let's finish up. So in that era, we talked about a PlayStation 2 a little bit. For me, let's talk about. We haven't talked about GameCube and we haven't talked about Xbox. So I think they're pretty important for at least for my
Mm-hmm.
gaming experience. And maybe
Oh yeah,
start,
I mean, yeah.
or you could start either one.
Yeah, and we kind of skimmed over it somewhat with Super Smash Melee.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, again, like we're talking about like a party system, GameCube.
Oh.
I said Nintendo 64 is a party system. GameCube is a party system. So you
Oh yeah.
had all kinds of good stuff as you got into Monkey Ball,
Oh.
and you had Super Smash Melee, you had Double Dash, Mario Kart Double Dash. So, you had a whole lot of cool games where everybody got together and got to fight it out in some games.
Yeah.
That was a good system,
Yeah.
great system. GameCube still, as far as like the games, I think that it's sort of a wild card, and there's some people that are like, it hasn't aged very well, but I don't know.
I love it.
GameCube's solid in my book. Yeah,
I
it still
love it.
might be one of my favorites to like go back to. Actually,
Yeah. I mean, it's for me, it's the look of it, the memories that came with it. I mean, my friends, I remember Daniel, he got one. And, I remember the first few games were like Luigi's Mansion, Super Smash Bros. There's a few other ones, but I remember he ended up getting like Pikmin and a few other games. But for us, yeah, the Mario Party, and then when Mario Golf and then Mario Kart came out as well. Those games were so fun to play with each other, dude. I mean, we would have
oh yeah,
And the first, I mean, it wasn't the first wireless controller, but that one that they had for the GameCube was, I forget, the Wavebird or
Yeah.
what do they call it?
Wavebird was a big deal, yeah. Is
Oh,
that's
it was
and
so
you're right,
nice.
is it wasn't the first, but it was the first one that really seemed to like matter to people. Like all of a sudden it
Yes.
was really cool to have a wireless controller. And I think it's because Wavebird was like one of the first ones to really do it right. Whereas like
It
there
felt
were the
so
ones that
good.
came before it, but the Wavebird, yeah, as a controller, felt good and it actually worked. And so
Yeah.
you
It,
could I remember like the advertising on it was like somebody sitting on a toilet and they had like a mirror in their bathroom and they could see the reflection of their TV and they were like playing a video game
mm-hmm.
and it was just like, yeah, that's exactly what you bought the Wavebird for. You, if you're taking a poop, you can still be playing the game.
Yeah, dude. Everybody wanted the Wavebird controller too. We only had like one or two, and then had regular
Yeah.
controllers.
No, I
But
mean that was like the winner's controller, bro.
yeah, that well, and another game too was I didn't like it as much because it wasn't. I mean, maybe it was multiplayer. I can't remember, but Metroid, um, when that came
Yeah.
out, I thought that was pretty cool. Um,
I know. I don't know why I never got into those because I like the side scroller like Metroid games, but when they came 3D with like the GameCube era,
mhm.
I never got into it. I don't really know why, but
It
I
took a
because I
certain
love
type.
like Metroid side scrollers, but I never got into that type of Metroid.
Hmm. I think it took a certain type of person because our buddy Brian, he was more like the gadgety geeky one out of us, and he was really into
Yeah,
that. I actually never owned Metroid, but I would play at his house, and um, and I never played some of the old original ones, and that's why I can't wait to get in some of these new handhelds or some of the retro handhelds, retro handhelds, and kind of go back on some of those older
both.
games and try some stuff out, but. Yeah, GameCube, dude. Even to this day, I actually don't know where my GameCube is. I've owned a few of them over the years, just for Smash Brothers. I've played some of the newer
Yeah,
Smash
I know
Brothers, but
that's what it is.
yeah, I'm thinking about getting a new one, even though, or getting another one, just because it's like
Yeah,
I don't have any kids, so as I've gotten older, I was like, man, I want to kind of go revisit stuff from my childhood and redo it up a bit. You know this, we talk about this kind of stuff all the time, and this is something we've been doing for years, going back and buying stuff and trying stuff that we used to do when we were kids, or playing games, or whatever, and just revisiting that stuff, but doing it from a standpoint of like, hey, if I want this thing or this game or this console or this controller or whatever, I'll just buy it, whereas like when we were kids, we
yeah.
were like, oh,
It's it. I
the
know
budgets
it.
and
We
what.
are fortunate enough to have that luxury now,
Yeah.
and I mean, even now, it's like I'll try to keep a budget, but I have collected what I want to collect. Is I'm not going out and getting like crazy valuable near mint
Right.
condition like games and boxes. I'm going
Mm-hmm.
out and getting games that I used to play because my intention is to play them again, and so I'm willing to pay for those games again so I can play them again and own them again and just like have them on my shelf and see them again.
Touch
And
them.
so that's a big part of it. It's like I when I did, and I always again I'm enjoying these like retro handhelds, but I do it all comes right back to how much that physical box feeling means to me still even now. It's like you can see all my books back here. It's like I like to
Yeah.
own. I don't want the PDF. I want those. And
Yeah.
it's the same with
I'm the
like
same
my
way.
game shelf. It's like I've got a whole shelf of those, like the games that meant something to me. And I'm not going out and spending $200 on a game. And I'm not too proud to buy a reproduction like copy.
Right.
If it's like Chrono Trigger, it's like I don't want
Yeah.
to pay $150 for like a cartridge when I can pay $25 for the cartridge and it still plays the same game. Still has, and
Yeah.
in fact, it has a fresher battery. Might be something that doesn't. It might be defective. Who knows? Whatever. But
Yeah.
it's still really cool to be able to like play those types of games on the original hardware, the original experience, and to be
Yeah.
able to like do it within whatever it means to you, like whatever you're willing to spend on it. There's a tier I think for everybody, and so it's fun getting into like the collection aspect of it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think if game studios don't change, there's a lot of stuff, and we'll talk about it in other episodes that goes on in modern games now, whether it's skins or transactions, money, all the stuff, agendas, political shit. I think if they don't change that, a lot more people are going to kind of do what we're doing, especially when you can in your hand play tons of different games from across years, like thousands and thousands and thousands of games, and you can revisit
Yeah.
them on your
Oh,
hand.
literally.
Like,
Yeah. And
uh,
the more you start to like kind of deep dive into it, you're gonna like see that there's games and systems and then whatever that you kind of slept on, or your buddy had this system, but did he have the TurboGrafx 16 or the Sega Saturn, or these like systems that you're like, well, no, I remember hearing about that system, but I never owned that system, and it's like, well, there's hits on those systems that you
oh
just
yeah,
never even played because you just we couldn't get a hold of a lot of those. As there were some that
yeah,
were like just poorly priced and that sort of thing, where these are like $800 consoles with like the time, like with inflation and everything. So it was just
yeah.
it's crazy. Like it's a whole rabbit hole you can go super super deep down into, as deep as you
Oh
want to
yeah.
go with it, and it's a fun experience.
It's rich, dude. I like it. I like it. I like something I can get into like that. I feel like nowadays we've talked about this a little bit earlier. It's just like everything's so fast paced, fast food. I feel like content's fast food content, just quick in and out.
Hmm.
Let get your attention. Nothing's of real meaning or comfort or
Yeah,
I don't know. It's just different nowadays, and maybe that's
I
a
know
sign of
it
because we're getting
is.
old. But like it's just I miss some of that shit. So that's why I want to revisit and before we got a couple more consoles to touch on, and then maybe we'll sum it up, and then we'll do the continuation of our intro video where we meet and kind of do more of the more modern stuff like WoW, Xbox 360, and stuff like that. But before we do, let's go ahead and finish up with I guess the Dreamcast and the Xbox, because for me, Dreamcast wasn't super huge but the Xbox was. So either one of those topics you want to start with, we can go.
Yeah, I mean that would be me too. Is to kind of like sum that up. And my from my perspective is I never owned a Sega Dreamcast, and so I didn't have any like real nostalgia for it.
Hmm.
But I do remember playing a little bit with like friends in high school, and so they had he had Soul Calibur on it, and that was cool. I love Soul Calibur. We could that goes back to
Oh yeah,
GameCube and stuff too. We love some Soul Calibur. There's a whole lot of fighting games like Tekken and Soul Calibur. It's like I haven't even really properly touched on those, but
no, no, no.
those are some joints in themselves. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that was my kind of general experience with it, and just what I was just saying is like TurboGrafx 16 and stuff. There's some really consoles that I've just like slept on because I just didn't know. And Dreamcast, I'm kind of coming into that now because I do have the Retroid Pocket 5.
oh
And
yeah,
it's just getting to play some of these games that I never got to play, or some of the games that I remember people talking about playing, but I never got to play because I was playing Crazy Taxi the other day, and so you have the Offspring. Is the
mm-hmm.
soundtrack is
Oh
the
yeah,
Offspring, and so it's a whole throwback. It's just like playing the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games and just like the music that was relevant at the time, and it's just like.
yeah,
So then you kind of get into it. So this whole like feeling of like, oh yeah, or like hearing Superman on Tony Hawk Pro Skater, like that's its
yep.
own like feeling now. Like going back, it's that's a
The
whole
soundtrack, yeah,
warm vibe.
yeah.
So,
That's
but yeah,
dude.
I mean, Sega
Okay.
Dreamcast. It was never like it was something that I would have loved to own, but I just never owned one. And I never owned a Xbox. I still haven't ever owned an original Xbox, and I'd love to have one because I'd love to homebrew some stuff on it. But you had one,
Yeah,
and I played the shit out of yours. I probably played
yeah,
yours more than you did at one point when
yeah.
you were on World of Warcraft. I was playing your Xbox.
Yeah, so sorry. Sometimes I almost cut you off. I get so excited
No, it's that's me
how
too.
we
No, no,
I
I'm
you'll
excited.
say something and it'll trigger a memory and then I forget. If I don't say
Hmm.
something on it. But the I was so fortunate, at that my buddy's house, Daniel, that they got a computer, like I said earlier, in AOL pretty quickly, and so one of my first memories on the internet uh was me and him looking in like Japan for different alternate versions of Sega Dreamcast and different games
Mm.
and controllers because at that point when we finally realized that the Dreamcast was a thing. I mean, we knew it was a thing, but it's kind of like the same story with us. A lot of people glossed over it because it was kind of on its way out as right as it launched in a lot of ways. The price, and just there's a lot of factors probably that went
Yeah.
into it that I don't know
Well,
about.
and
But
I guess that is one of the reasons I didn't have proper access to it, is because it did have a short shelf life,
short run, yeah.
and that was unfortunate for it because it was super super ahead of its time, but the
Hmm.
pricing just wasn't right. And I
Yeah.
think overall, like the games and the selection just never took off because you had other systems that
Hmm.
were just super on fire at the time. You had
Yeah.
64 that was just
PlayStation
super
really.
on fire, PlayStation that was super on fire. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. And so I think you just start comparing prices and stuff, and you could have, I don't know, that's all, that's debatable, but I
Yeah.
think people felt that PlayStation was a superior system.
Well, I think parents, right, controlled a lot of those decisions in that time for at least my
Yeah,
house because it's like
price controls a lot of those
price.
systems.
Well,
Like this
that's
one costs 300,
yeah,
this one costs 400. Which one do we buy?
yeah, and and I'm sure like to some degree the people selling that stuff had to have some idea that like this system's on the way out. So I'm sure like PlayStation or maybe 60. I mean PlayStation eventually dominated until like the GameCube and stuff. Don't get me wrong, 64 was awesome, but I think like if you look back, like your average person probably had the PlayStation. Just because of
Hmm.
price. I think a lot more people were in that situation like me where it's like they
Yeah.
just have the money for
Oh
shit.
man.
So
Yeah, and
Dreamcast,
it was
go ahead.
huge. It became like the everyman system, and I think that was like it was a shift of everything as far as like gaming for through the 80s and 90s all the way up until then, because there was the console wars between like Sega Genesis, but PlayStation actually brought it, and they intended to kind of take over and make like the gaming
Oh yeah.
sphere belong to them, which is interesting because there was a point going into before the PlayStation 1 came out. That was something that happened with that is Sony had approached Nintendo and talked about maybe
Mm-hmm.
working on a console together, and they were like, well, we want to do like a CD drive thing, and Nintendo's like, we don't really want to do the CD thing because then people can burn the disc, and they
Yeah.
can kind of like get a hold of our stuff, and we want to like maintain to where if we have these in carts, it keeps them safe, and we can keep selling them, and we don't have to worry about pirating as much.
Yeah.
And so PlayStation or Sony was like, all right, well, we'll go do our thing then. And
Yeah.
it was unfortunate for Nintendo because they did take Square Enix or Square Soft at the time with them, and so they ended up getting the rights to like Final Fantasy and all that ultimately as well. And so yeah, PlayStation came out of the gates fucking strong at the
Yeah.
time.
So if I remember right, Sony, I don't know how it all worked out, but I want to say that Sony and Sega teamed up at a certain point, and that's why you got the Sega Saturn disc. Because we didn't talk about Sega Saturn. I didn't own one.
Hmm.
Uh,
Same.
they were too expensive. Sega Game Gear.
Yeah.
My buddy Daniel ended up getting one of those, and which is wild because it's like almost the same form as a fucking Steam Deck nowadays. But he had one of
Yeah.
those. And back to the Dreamcast. Before I forget, we hunted on the internet for rare colors, stuff like that over in Japan. I think what probably got us into it was the fact that I remember when Sega, it was kind of just over for Sega, and uh, the Dreamcast people. I remember like reading articles in the magazines and stuff, and just kind of being like, well, Sega. I don't know if they ultimately sold or what happened, but I remember it was a big deal once, like the newer, more modern systems at the time came out, and then there was like Sega games on those. But that Sega Saturn, I think for us, my buddy Daniel, he got one, but he only got like 4 or 5 games, and I want to say
Yeah.
like the only ones I really remember was a fishing game. There was another game where you were like this Japanese bro, and he was like a detective, and it was like real innovative for the time. You'd like walk around and like almost like an open world thing, and it was
Now is that
multi-ball.
were you talking about on Dreamcast?
Dreamcast. There's
Shamoon
yeah,
or
that's it.
Shimoon or
The
whatever.
yeah, every game everybody knows
Yeah,
what I'm
which
probably talking about.
was crazy at the time. Like
Yeah.
super slice of life where people weren't doing that back then.
Yeah, so we were kind of collecting stuff for even at that age of like 11, 12 years old, right before up till where I met you in freshman year. Like literally, we were collecting that kind of stuff or trying to. We'd go work a little odd jobs, mow grass, and we'd buy, old Dreamcast games. And we eventually got a couple controllers.
Yeah.
And I think we got Blitz on there because NFL Blitz was also on Dreamcast as well. And I actually liked that version a little bit better than I think what was the PlayStation was the other one. But yeah, dude.
Yeah, I played it on 64, and that was always cool. But my issue was, and it's because I was a dumbass little kid. Is anytime like the new hotness came around, then I was so willing and so quick to sell off the old
The
shit.
old ones.
And so
Yeah.
I sold off like classic games and systems and stuff probably for like pennies so that I could buy some crappy game for the newer system. And so that was a poor choice on my part, and I've redeemed myself for my sins by recollecting all those like all my childhood trinkets. But yeah, that's I had to like maintain with the times. It's like I couldn't have this new system, but I can
Yeah.
still go buy this game for the Game Boy Advance, and it's gonna be real cool. All I gotta do is trade
Yeah.
in my Super Nintendo and 10 games.
Yeah, dude. I was gonna ask you, whatever happened to your copy of the N64 Harvest Moon?
Um, I do not know, and I don't think that my sister has it. She has my original, like the actual Nintendo 64 that I got, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that was in 1998, the Christmas of '98 that I got my N64, and she still has my original one.
Are you sure
And
that's
I've
your
lost
original?
some. Yeah,
Because
I
remember
didn't
you
know at
traded
first.
me. Because didn't you or did you trade me? I can't remember if I traded you. Because remember when we first met, I think I traded you a Sega Genesis for an
You traded
N64
well, I think what it was actually is
or
you had
GameCube.
Harvest Moon, Friends of Mineral Town on Game Boy
Mm-hmm.
Advance, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
think I had a Game Boy Advance anymore. And so I think you were kind of even at the time, which is really funny because this is like back in high school. You're like, I want to go back to like the old school. I want to get some Sega Genesis.
Yeah.
And so I think you'd already kind of played the shit out of Friends of Mineral Town, and you were
Mm-hmm.
willing to make that trade. And that was
Yeah.
cool too because then we got into A Wonderful Life and stuff together later on, and we ended up
Mm-hmm.
talking. Speaking of where is that memory cards?
Yeah.
Is I remember you giving me some of your save data for A Wonderful Life, Harvest Moon, A
Really?
Wonderful Life on GameCube. Yeah,
I don't
because you had
remember
figured out
that.
that you could grow trees and make crap tons of money, and you're like, bro, it's so easy. Like you could have pretty much infinite money on this game, and so you
Cause
say copied your save file to a memory card and gave that to me.
yeah. Oh yeah. Another one was that was awesome was Animal Crossing on the GameCube, dude. That made me think of
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah, I
Animal Crossing
know,
at the
yeah,
time.
really,
So
really
cool.
cool concept, yeah. And that was
Yeah,
another
dude.
one. Is like in talking about Nintendo 64, is there was a whole lot of like Japanese exclusives that we missed out on. And
Mm-hmm.
Animal Crossing in our time came to GameCube first, but if you go if in Japan they had exclusives, and that was one of them
Oh
that we
wow.
missed out on. Is the original was
Yeah.
for Nintendo 64.
Wow. I never knew that actually. That's wild, man. I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
yeah. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of cool games that were just like exclusives for those systems that we missed out on because, and it's for a lot of things. But during that time, it was like when anime and stuff was really starting to pick up in America. They had to keep it as white bread as possible in all the translations, and so sometimes like
Gotcha.
I think people like looked at like the way that Japanese culture and anime and stuff portrayed characters and such, and they're like, yeah, it's like our
Yeah.
America ain't ready for that yet.
Not until Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, and even then, it's just like, whoa, oh, Master Roshi's looking at these video game magazines.
Yeah, yeah, right. That's something I got. We should do King of Hill episode, Toonami episode, the Dragon Ball Z episode. We'll break down a lot of stuff like because there's so many things like
Yeah.
we could literally
Oh
probably sit here
man.
for days talking about all the shit.
Yeah,
So we are
it would
glossing
have
over
been
a
easy
lot,
to do.
but just I wanted to rehash some of these things out because yeah, it's fun reliving them. We were talking about the GameCube, the PlayStation 2 a little bit, and we gotta. I know you said you didn't have an Xbox. We talked about the Dreamcast a little bit. I never owned one, but like I said, Daniel had one, played it a little bit. It was great, but uh, that's pretty much it. So maybe we jump to the Xbox and. I can't
Yeah,
real. This is probably the first time that I can remember, other than like obviously Mario Kart and stuff like that, where people that really didn't hang out with us in our neighborhood came to us, and we all had a big tournament with a LAN,
yeah,
4 versus 4 on Halo. I mean,
yeah.
Halo
You're
is
playing
pretty
Halo.
much the reason that I bought an Xbox. You know,
Yeah,
uh,
that's the only reason anybody bought an Xbox at the time, and
pretty
and
much.
that's not to underestimate the Xbox because it was its own powerhouse. Is that's talking about this like the shift of like game like the industry and the culture and everything
Yeah,
is like when Xbox came around, like Microsoft's like, well, we're we can do this too, and they were actually putting out really solid exclusives for the Xbox at the time.
yeah.
I mean, Dead or Alive Volleyball. Like, if you were a 13-year-old boy and
Oh
you wanted
yeah,
to
we
play
got
some
that game.
volleyball,
Yeah, we got
and
that.
not only, and there's actually a good volleyball game. I mean, I'm playing it for the
Yeah,
sport. I don't know
yeah.
about you guys.
We probably played it a total 30 minutes after you looked at all the characters. You know,
Yeah,
but yeah, the
but
X. Yeah,
Halo was huge, man.
huge,
That's a
huge.
yeah.
And
Yeah, that, and I think talking about that is like as far as like us getting we kind of did some game trades and stuff, but actually like playing a game together, like
yeah,
Halo was a big one for us, is like getting together with you and
oh
it's like
yeah,
anybody, because anybody would jump on and play some Halo with you. It didn't matter who they were.
yeah. Well, we'll jump into that and kind of really talk about some of these things as we go through our French. You know, because we haven't even
Oh,
really
I'm
got to
sure.
meeting yet. And this is just stuff
Yeah.
that we're going through up until that point. But yeah, I mean, as far as Xbox, bro, like, I mean, I can't sit here and pretend like I've had a lot of games for it or whatever. I mean, once again, Daniel was the first one to have it, and we really got it for basically Halo and
hmm
maybe a few other games, but basically
That's why you
Halo.
got an Xbox.
Yeah, yeah, basically Halo. And I can't say how much of that like that game probably affected my life for years to come. As
Yeah,
far as
really.
one of the, I mean, not obviously I played GoldenEye and a few other things and stuff over the years on different consoles,
Yeah,
but Halo, something about it, riding around,
it
lobbing
it had an
rockets,
impact.
yeah,
Yeah,
lobbing
getting on
rockets
the
at each
warthog
other,
and like riding around
yeah,
for the first time and all that just felt really cool.
throwing grenades across the map. I can't. That's the first game where I almost beat somebody up because that we fought some other people and it was at your house. Remember, Zach came over and these guys were scream looking. You know,
Oh yeah, I do remember that. Yeah,
because
I
you knew
know.
he was.
Some
I knew he
bullshit.
was instantly because he come straight to you with the sword, bro. And we had a question. I asked him like, "You scream looking, bro?" He's like, "So
I
what?
know.
It's part of
He
the
was trying to
game."
say he was good.
Yeah, yeah. Like, come on. And I
Yeah,
think
that's
we.
how. Yeah, that was like Halo though. It's like
Mhm.
talking about Scream looking. Like that was the
Yeah.
game for Scream lookers. Like if you wanted to be a cheater, that's the game to be cheating on.
Yeah, well, we started playing. I forget the mode what it was called, but if you had a screen looker, you could turn the radar thing off, so it made it a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
challenging. And then you stare at the
Mm-hmm.
ground. That's the type of shit I would do, and just wait for people to come by and stuff. I don't know, but but yeah, the Halo, the Smash Bros at the time, and a few other games. Everyone would come over to that place, and we would have 8 or 9 every weekend, every summer, all summer for years, dude, up until the like ninth grade, like I
mm-hmm.
said. And the last thing that we haven't talked about much, man, is handhelds. And my first experience with one was with Daniel back when we were 5 years old. In first grade, he had the original Game Boy, which the black and or the green, you know what I mean, the original Game Boy, not the
Oh
Game Boy
yeah,
Color. But he had that. Pretty
the
impressed
old
with.
DMG.
Was it Donkey Kong on there? I want to say. Did he have a
Yeah,
Donkey Kong
yeah.
game?
Donkey Kong on there was really good actually, and that was
Yeah.
a that's where they had taken like the original like Donkey Kong concept from the arcade,
Hmm.
and there's a certain point where you progress into that game where Donkey Kong picks up and it becomes kind of more modernized. And that's a fun game. That's actually one that I
Yeah.
still go back to. I probably played that a couple weeks ago or something like again.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
enjoyed Donkey Kong for Game Boy.
Did you remember that documentary we watched, Fistful of Quarters or whatever about the Donkey
Yeah,
Kong dudes?
King of Kong.
Don't say the one dude's name because he'll sue the shit out of
Yeah,
us.
I know. I was
I
like
know.
talking about
Don't say
him.
that. Don't say that.
OBM.
Yeah, but they made a part two of it or something, and he ended up getting well. If you if you've seen that, go watch it. We don't want to ruin it for anybody, but I remember watching it in
Yeah,
your
that's
basement,
a
watching
cool
that.
one.
It's a good
Yeah, it's a
documentary.
good little
Yeah,
documentary, and I think that's held up. I went back and watched that a few years ago, and it's still,
yeah.
it's very fitting for his character, and just like the whole story is like fun, even if you're not really a gamer or something. I think you can like get into like the rocky underdog tale that it's telling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess probably one of the most important consoles or handheld gaming systems ever for me at least would be the probably the Game Boy Color. Even though I didn't own a lot of games for it, I mean Pokemon Red and Blue or Yellow,
That's all you need it to
that was
own. Yeah,
huge.
those are yeah. That's what I
Still,
had too. Is I had that and Link to the Past
oh nice.
DX on Game Boy Color because there was the original, and that's the same game.
Zelda
Oh,
game,
I'm
yeah,
sorry, not yeah, it
yeah.
was. But they Link's Awakening was for Game Boy,
I
original
think
Game Boy, and Game Boy Color was Link's Awakening. Link to the Past is a Super Nintendo.
I think you ended up letting me borrow one of those Zelda games for the I think the Game Boy Color or something at some point because I think you played those
Yeah,
games, didn't you?
super fun game. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's an excellent game, and that along with Pokemon, that's like 200 hours of entertainment
Oh
for
yeah.
real. It's like a kid.
I remember with Pokemon and Wind Waker. I meant to say that for GameCube. I think it was
Oh
that was
baby, yeah,
huge. Sorry, we're jumping there, but I
yeah,
just
yeah.
you
I
talking
know,
about
because I
Zelda.
mean,
You made me think about
talking,
Wind
yeah,
Waker.
you don't even, yeah, because I'll
Yeah.
talk about Zelda for 3 hours.
Yeah, but the Pokemon was huge for anyone our age, or even till now. I mean, there's modded versions of it, different versions and stuff. But I remember just taking that freaking Game Boy, and we'll do a Pokemon episode too, because that was a huge part of my childhood with cards
Yeah,
and stuff
for
like that.
sure, man.
But that Game Boy Color went everywhere. I had a purple one, and I took it everywhere, man. I played the shit out of Red. Um, I played a few other games, and then the Advance came out. And I remember my buddies, they got one before me. I ended up getting one eventually, but they got one before me. And then that was the first time that I'd ever played. I remember the first time I'd ever played Friends of Mineral Town Harvest Moon was the SP came out. It was the first backlit deal because beforehand we
Ooh,
had to do the
baby,
plug
yeah,
in with the magnifying glass on the fucking
yeah.
Advance and
And it
in the
sucked
color.
anyway. Nobody,
Yeah.
you couldn't actually play at night with that thing.
Now you could certain
You
like very
could and you
limited,
did.
but you
You
did.
could and
But
you
yeah,
did, but no,
nah,
that's tough.
yeah. So you we get the SP. And really, the only games I played on that was Harvest Moon, I think, and maybe Advance Wars. And then I remember me and you one summer we worked together on a fucking log cabin, staying in a log cabin, which was the whole deal. And the money that we were supposed to get, which was supposed to be like $600-700 a piece, I think we got like 150 a piece. I used that to buy. I
Yeah,
think was it the DS at the time? What was the
you got
white?
the DS.
Was it the
Yeah,
white one with the stencil?
you got the
Yeah.
white DS. Yeah, because I
Yes.
enjoyed playing that on
Yep.
yours. You had
Yeah.
you had a couple of games, but again, it was good. You had Harvest
It's
Moon
cool.
DS, and you had Animal Crossing DS.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I forgot about the DS version of Animal Crossing, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
played the Pokemon games of Silver. We got to talk about Silver and Gold. I mean, that was freaking awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm. That was a
Ruby.
big part of that time for me is just playing second gen Pokemon. So that's
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah, dude. The Silver. Probably. I mean, I loved Red and Blue. I didn't have Pokemon Yellow. My cousin did, but we had Red and Blue. That was great. But the Silver and Gold, just I remember with
Mm-hmm.
getting the box and opening it and just like I was just enthralled with it, dude. And
That was
it go
huge. Yeah.
so much fun.
That
And
was during the prime of like Pokemania though. It's like
yes,
Pokemon was literally getting like American theatrical releases and like selling
yeah,
out theaters and stuff. So those are
yeah,
different times that we were living in.
yeah. I still remember when Dad took me over to the theater, and we ended up watching the Pokemon movie, dude. And it was awesome, man. I had such a
Mm-hmm.
vibe, dude. I
Mm-hmm.
miss. trading cards on a trampoline after school, on the bus, at school. Um, yeah, it's a great part, man. But yeah, I mean, as far as I ended up getting one of the more 3DS, I think it was, but I didn't really even play it, man. So, what about you? Did
Hmm.
you get any like with your what's your experience with Game Boys and stuff?
Yeah, that was kind of me too. Is I had the Game Boy Color, and then for my 16th birthday, actually, I got a Game Boy Advance. And so instead of getting a car, I got a Game Boy Advance, which was way cooler.
Oh yeah,
And I didn't have a DS until a little bit later on. I got the 3DS, and I kind of felt the same way you felt about that. And then I never got to touch on like PSP, and you get into like Sony portables and stuff too. I did have a Game Gear when I was really young, and
wow,
I broke it in a couple of days. And talking about that shitty Lion King gang, that's what I was
yeah,
playing on the Game Gear, and I got pissed and threw it down or something, broke the screen. So that was terrible. But yeah, I kind of fell out of love with like that type of gaming, and that's probably a little bit going back into like we were getting a little older and getting into like PC
mm-hmm.
gaming. And
Yeah,
so it's like, well, we could play on this little screen or we could play on
mm-hmm.
our big, it's like literally the size of a TV screen now.
Yeah.
And we're playing World of Warcraft with our buddies.
RuneScape,
And so it's
really,
like, well, do
because
you want to play this game or do you want to play this game? You're
yeah,
crushing rock stars and eating hot Cheetos.
yeah. Watching RuneScape PvP music or videos with no voice or anything, a couple texts and just that.
Yeah, exactly. All the
Somebody
Linkin
DDS
Park
specking somebody
AMVs.
out. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, man. And it can kind of bring us a little bit to where we're at now because I back during COVID, bro. I ended up buying. I was just feeling nostalgia, and I ended up buying the same exact purple Game Boy Color that I had as a kid, and I only
Atomic
had a
Purple.
yeah, I only had the purple one because you couldn't find certain colors, and the same way with the advance, you could only get like the glacial or I think even like a girl color one. Which, anyways, but yeah,
Well, you don't want the girl color one or something?
well, look, at the time we would like I was like I'll take a pink or whatever it was. I think there was like a white one, a glacial purple one, and then a purple. I can't remember all the colors, but
Hmm.
the original drop with the advance. But yeah, man. During COVID, I bought that, and I was like, man, this is cool, but it kind of sucks without a backlight or any kind of light. And
Sure
then so
does.
I
I
went on
know.
eBay and I got a game. I guess it's somebody took the shell and put a new screen in with a backlight on it. And it's a wood grain. The shell's like wood grain look to it, painted like that,
No, yeah,
and it had a backlight
yeah.
on it. So I picked up, of course, all the Pokemon games like Silver and Gold and Red and stuff, and I played those for a bit. But just being by myself, it wasn't the same. I didn't have nobody to trade with or talk about it with much. So, but fast forward 4 years, man, I don't know what spawned me into it. Just feeling it every 3 or 4 years, I get to feeling nostalgic vibes, and I think what spawned it was, and I meant to talk about this earlier, but I forgot. Was with that CRTV that I got from you in a trade from a few years ago. I pulled it out and I got multiple monitors, real nice ones, curved ones and stuff for my PC and shit. But I just wanted to play some old games, and then I wanted to watch some old cartoons like DBZ, Gundam, and stuff on there because I started collecting some DVDs. Uh, and I started collecting them because a lot of stuff's edited or maybe it's a bootleg version or whatever stuff's missing, like or certain soundtracks. So I got some, especially Dragon Ball Z. There's so many versions. So I started picking up some
Yeah,
of like
really.
the yellow boxes for Dragon Ball Z, and something else I picked up was her and I, when we're chilling, we'll put on something on the TV. It's kind of like King of the Hill or something that's not really we're paying attention to that we've seen a million times. And at the time, I was watching that '70s show again. 'Cause, I've seen it a million times. I really liked that growing up, and it's one of those shows kind of like Always Sunny. You could put on in the background and just chill while you're doing stuff. Well,
Hmm.
I put that on and I'm watching it and I'm like blown away how much it looks better. Mind you, it is in 4:3, but it looks better than when because you couldn't stream it on a streaming app there for a while. They took it off Netflix or something. So we were watching it on the DVDs and that DVD looked better than the other ones. Now there's some stuff that plays into this with newer TVs and stuff like but my point was it kind of opened my eyes, and I told you about it at the time. I was like, this shit looks better than a brand new 4K TV. Now
Hmm.
there what made it look better is probably because that was shot and made for that TV at the time, but something about the way the
Yeah,
colors
is you
popped and
still were in
glowed.
like a standard definition era of like
Yeah,
TV, and so like putting that on a big screen, like flat screen HD TV, like
for
it
shit.
does not translate that well.
And I forget the technical term for it, but now you can turn it off in a lot of TVs. But there's that what is like every so many milliseconds or seconds, it's basically generating. And somebody's going to probably put this in the comment section, but and please do. But there's some basically the technology. I forget what it's called, but in a lot of modern TVs you can turn it off. But it's basically putting every three images, as a video is going through, it's basically not AI, but it's basically generating an image to help speed it along as you're streaming
Yeah,
stuff. And
yeah,
and you notice this in their faces and things like, especially on that 70 show. Watched it on the other TV, it's got this beautiful glow to it. The sound obviously coming out the TV shit, so I'll plug in some speakers. And dude, I up until she was like, "Yo, I'm getting tired of hearing the humming sound on the TV because it's got that." I actually like that. I'm got some weird horn
mm,
me.
yeah,
Yeah, I like it. But yeah, that kind of sent me down this path of revisiting this again and enjoying older stuff or retro games or shows or just I watch a lot of Toonami After Hour. So, anyways, it's a channel, a website where, and you should put this on this. Put me onto this, I'm pretty sure, but you can go on there and watch old Toonami shows, commercials, and stuff on there. But to sum it up, uh, these new retro handhelds, I didn't know were on the level that they're on. I know they've been coming out over the last 4 or 5 years, man, but they're on the next level. And I ordered a
hmm
retro classic, and it's on the way, but it's been delayed. But you're gonna guide me through some of this shit and kind of teach me some stuff about it, because you're not an expert, but you got a lot of the handhelds. So I figure,
yeah.
uh, you be a good one to teach me, man. So next
Yeah,
episode,
and I want to because and that's the thing is not just with you, but it has, and it's the same longing as you're talking about. It's like every couple years or whatever, I kind of go in these cycles. And so the last major cycle I was collecting a lot of like physical copies and stuff. But now I'm getting into I'm busy,
mm-hmm.
and these retro handhelds can go with me, and it kind of suits my lifestyle a little bit more as like a father and a manager of a business and that sort of things. Like I'm always moving, and this can move along with me, and it's not a console that I have to plug into a 19-inch CRT that
Mm-hmm.
weighs 50 pounds.
Yeah,
And so I have all that stuff, and I have access to that stuff, and I love that. I love the physical. We've already talked about that. Like that experience is optimal for me, but I do like the just the portability and the accessibility and the ability to kind of like ultimately pass this on and say, hey, if you want to play those games that you used to play, you can play them for a pretty decent price, and you can play them anywhere you go.
yeah,
And so it's a neat experience. And yeah, will you were talking about the Game Boy Advance SP and how it had the black light on it and stuff, and just like even the side by side comparison to some of these like retro handhelds. I'll show you one of the ones that I have.
yeah,
Just it's crazy. As much as that technology has advanced in the last 5 years, is like if you want to get into something like that and that you're even a little bit curious about it, then I want to help you, and I want to help anybody else that's like curious about those things, because it's a really cool time to get into retro gaming right now, as we're reaching like a
yeah,
real cool like emulation and everything's like it has an awesome scene. It's like peak right now. So if you want to check any of that shit out, then we're definitely gonna check some of that
yeah,
stuff out, because I love it. I love it. I'm passionate about it, and I want to help everybody. Like, if they don't know something about it, I want to help teach them or just share the love. That's what it's all about. It's like sharing the love. It's like me and you just sat here and talked about how much it's clearly all passion and love.
yeah.
And I know that there's other people that have that same passion and love, and like just
Yeah.
We're all part of that gaming hive mind, and that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's a real cool culture, and it's a real cool place to be with just the real world right out here. We can just like talk about the games right here, and that's really
Yeah.
neat.
Yeah, I guess to sum it up for me, I think even though we're in a modern day, or today, it is a fast food type of culture, or with games and with a lot of things. I think it is beautiful though that you can get something like a retro handheld console of some kind, or whether that's
Hmm.
buy, or maybe you just want to buy old consoles from eBay's or whatever you're doing. I think it's cool. What that is super cool, but what's even cooler is being able to share it with other people. Because as I've gotten older, whether people have passed away or people have moved away, uh, you know, I still have my core group of friends like you and a couple of the other guys. But you guys, like you said earlier, you're busy all the time. So like building up a community for people to talk about this stuff, especially in today, it's so many things on people's minds and the topics that are in a lot of people's mouths or minds or on the internet. It's a little bit much for me. I want to dial it back to a time where I'm having fun and I'm enjoying myself and I'm investing my time and around people and things that I enjoy, and that's what it's all about. It doesn't matter your background, whatever your preferences are in life, that type of thing. You just enjoying games, enjoying nerdy culture, and just being a nerd. Because when me and you were kids, bro, like I didn't get picked on, but being a nerd wasn't that cool, really, right? Like, I mean, it
Yeah,
was to us, but
yeah. I mean, yeah, the society was still kind of coming around to it, and so there were
mm-hmm.
like certain games that you could say that you played. If you played Mortal Kombat, then that's a cool
Yeah,
game. Well, that's for cool kids. But there were
yeah,
certain games, and even like Pokemon, like I had some whatever behind it, like pushback
mm-hmm.
is it was too cool, and so all of a
Yeah,
sudden it's like, oh, you play Pokemon? It's like, no, I don't
yeah.
play Pokemon. That shit's for nerds,
Yeah,
bro.
we aged out, dude. And it's nerdy, dude. No, what now? Look at us now. If we would have kept all that stuff, we'd be millionaires. No,
Yeah,
but,
yeah, I
but
know, I
yeah.
know.
So
I would own the Pokemon franchise by now.
yeah, I'm excited, dude, for the future, man. This has been a awesome first intro episode.
Yeah,
Uh,
man, I know.
and
I had so much fun talking with you, and I could tell that we have so much,
yeah,
obviously, so much to talk about,
yep,
and we will kind of start with square one on this because I think this is these retro handhelds are a cool way to experience like literally I think every system that we talked about basically today.
yeah,
You have access to some of these on these systems, and so it's a cool opportunity to like get back into that like nostalgia, and I think I'm an optimist, and I do know that at the end of the day, though, I have to accept the fact that I'll never be able to like go back and recapture those like feelings in a
right,
true like kind of sense. But there is something about like going back to some of these games and just like what they mean to me and experiencing like games that I never experienced before for the first time and stuff even. So it's like all of a sudden like retro is like new to me again right now. It's like I'm going through kind of like a renaissance era of like gaming like in my personal life right now, and it's like a real
yeah,
cool place to be. And that's why I'm like, well, hey world, and like guess what I'm doing. It's like this
yeah.
is really cool, guys, come check it out. So it's like, yeah, if it sounds cool, then yeah, for real, come check it out because it's fucking awesome.
Well, we started our friendship almost 21 years ago, in about two to 3 months, right? And this is exactly why we started our friendship. I'll be honest, I was scared shitless my first day of high school. I didn't really have any friends. I didn't really know anybody. Uh, and through the chance of our names being the same, we ended up in a classroom together as our homeroom. And,
Yeah,
that's how it all began with literally a
yeah.
conversation about video games. And we were together. uh, Dude, there was probably what, 10 years of our lives that we lived together damn near every day. I mean,
Hmm.
uh, for a long time, skipped school, kissed on girls, all that fun stuff. Partied. We
Hmm.
went through it all together. Relationships, through all that stuff. I mean, there was years where we called each other every day, talking about this kind of
Yeah.
shit.
Oh
And
yeah. Yeah,
I
exactly. I know. And that's even when we weren't like staying and living whatever together, because that
mm,
goes both ways. Is like, I was just as much as over at your mom's house for the longest
yeah,
time as you were at mine's, and so
yeah.
there's a whole lot of
Well,
like back and forth for years and
you
years. Like,
yeah. The only time we ever really lost touch was when we were chasing a girl or something, and that's really,
yeah,
and that's not that we lost touch. We just got, it's what can you expect? You can't spend the time with a hairy old stinky dude all the time when you got a pretty girl,
yeah.
But
But you can always, take a little, 3 hour break every once in a while to come back and sit down with your boy and just talk about the good old days and
yeah,
talk about some games. And so I appreciate you inviting me to that experience because it's
yeah,
that's fun. 'Cause this is my forte and I enjoy
I
it.
know.
And again, it's like it's
Well,
all about spreading the love of it.
yeah, I guess the sum it all up, man. I remember watching G4 and X Play and all this stuff, reading Gaming, Electronic Gaming Monthly. All I really want to do is kind of not. I'm never going to be able to replicate all that stuff, obviously, but things that people can look forward to on this show or podcast, whatever you want to call it, gaming show, is we could even do some field trip type things where we go out and especially once I move back in the state, we'll go hit up some some shops, some LGSs. We're going to talk about like card games. We're going to talk about D&D. Maybe we'll talk about some music as well because that was a big part of our lives. And
Yeah.
we're gonna go through
Yeah, I know.
gaming.
This is
There's
like
so
such a
much stuff.
small like piece of it, and even
Yeah,
this is just feels so massive.
I know it's gonna be huge, and I'd like to maybe we can even eventually break down and do like some reviews for some of these games that we can play together or test out together. What just we'll do all kinds of fun stuff, y'all. And if you guys want to support us, I'm gonna drop a little link down in wherever whatever platform this on is on. There's gonna be a little Patreon. It's $5 a month if you want to help us out. If you like the show, if you want to show us some support, it would be great. If not, that's cool too. You can watch freeze on YouTube's and call it a day. But I just want to say thanks so much for giving me your time. I told you in the beginning it's going to be a 2 hour. That's why I knew we weren't going to get to showing all the handhelds off. But I do want to say thanks so much for your time. And
Yes, thank you, man.
you know,
I've really enjoyed just kind of ranting on and on about this, and I
yep,
it's really cool. Because I will say that as much as I've heard so many stories and so much that I've been there for personally, there's a whole lot of things that I heard for the first time tonight, and even you mentioning like the floppy disk thing at the Kroger and stuff. I was like, man, that's just like I love that. I love
yeah,
hearing other people like talk about those types of experiences because we all have those, and they are all our own unique experiences. And
yeah.
so I learned a few things, about an old friend tonight, and that's a real neat thing in itself. So
Yeah, I mean, when you're out there in a rural, I mean, this is can apply to anyone, I guess, but for us, or at least for me, my imagination went wild because living out in rural areas where there's nothing really, you got like a gas station. Those games were a ticket or a doorway into another world to not necessarily escape, but just to experience something different, a different change of pace, and have
hmm
a somewhat of a grasp or a pulse on what everyone else was doing at my age, and almost even though it wasn't a community, it kind of was in a way because you could at least when you go
yeah,
somewhere, you could talk to this stuff about
yeah,
people, share
yeah. And
experiences,
in
and
the cafeteria and the playground, it started.
yeah,
You started to become like a community, and that's like
it's cool.
that was awesome. It's like all of a sudden we were more connected.
Yep. Let's bring it back, brother. The community. Let's build it. They say if you build it, they'll come. But all right, bro.
I'll definitely be there.
I love you, dog. Let's get off of here.
I love you, man. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And we'll do it again sometime.
Yep. Another episode coming soon. Peace.
Ayo, stay tuned.